Chapter 98. News of Li Daocheng being devoured by a mutated dark ghost while he was traveling spread throughout Tianyuan City. Li Daocheng sneered in his heart after hearing Li Qingyao's story. Of course, someone had spread the news. Clearly, they wanted to test whether he was dead or not. The assassin sent to kill him had been burned to ashes by Chu Qianyue. How could a dead person report back? The person who hired the assassin didn't know whether he was dead or not and didn't dare to reveal himself. So they used this method to test him. Qingyao, what did you say? Li Daocheng asked. I only said that I didn't contact you after you went out, Li Qingyao replied. If someone asks you in the future, say the same thing, Li Daocheng instructed. Since someone wanted him dead, he would let them think that he was dead for now. Before the competition began, Li Daocheng didn't want anything to go wrong. Li Qingyao seemed to understand Li Daocheng's intentions and nodded. Okay, big brother. After resting for 2 days, Li Daocheng spent another 3 days researching spirit sequences and successfully creating 2 level 4 fire talismans. After that, Li Daocheng left the old mansion through the underground passage and went to the underground city. There was still a month until the competition. It wasn't a long time, but it wasn't a short time either. Li Daocheng didn't want to waste time. If Li Daocheng wanted to cultivate, the only way was to kill dark ghosts. Other methods were only supplementary. After nearly 4 months, Li Daocheng came to the underground city again. This time, the feeling was completely different from the previous 2 times. When Li Daocheng first came here, his cultivation was too low. He felt very uneasy in this underground force where crooks mixed in with the honest folk and did not play by the rules. Now, Li Daocheng was at the 10th stage of the Qi refinement realm. His embryonic spirit root had formed. His strength was completely different from before. Blue Bay Star was a 4th-class cultivation planet in the Federation. The strongest cultivator there was only at the early stage of Jindan. Li Tianyang was an exception. Originally, Li Tianyang alone was enough to raise Blue Bay Star to a 3rd-class cultivation planet. Unfortunately, the heavens were jealous of geniuses, and that was no longer possible. There were less than 10 Jindan early-stage cultivators in the entire Blue Bay Star. Most of them were old guys who were over 150 years old. They could only live in seclusion in the depths of their families to recuperate and extend their lifespans as much as possible. There were only 3 or 4 Jindan cultivators on Blue Bay Star who were still alive and kicking. There weren't many Foundation establishment cultivators in Blue Bay Star. There weren't more than 200 of them. Half of them were sent out by their respective families, and the remaining half were mostly in the early and middle stages of Foundation establishment. In Blue Bay Star, reaching the peak stage of the Qi gathering stage was already considered a very powerful expert. The 10th level of Qi refining was naturally not considered powerful, but in the entire Blue Bay Star, it was definitely at the middle level. If he had 1 or 2 trump cards on him, it wasn't impossible for him to fight with someone at the early stage of the Qi gathering stage. Li Daocheng would have enough capital to fight with an assassin of the same strength as before if he were to launch a sneak attack. With a 9-split saber technique and 2 4th-class fire talismans, even a cultivator at the early stage of the Qi gathering stage would have to consider whether their trump cards were strong enough to deal with Li Daocheng. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would fail miserably. This time, Li Daocheng was familiar with the underground city. He went straight to the Shadow Serene Street. Last time, Li Daocheng had become a junior member, so it was very easy for him to enter the Shadow Serene Street. Li Daocheng was wearing a training sweater, a hat, and a mask. Most people who came to the underground city didn't want to expose themselves, so most of them wore covert clothes. People dressed like Li Daocheng were everywhere. Li Daocheng entered the Shadow Serene Street and went straight to the South District. He only had one goal today, and that was to find the old man who had sold him the ghost disciple last time. Before coming, Li Daocheng had sent a message to the old man. Last time, the 2 of them had left their spiritual net IDs, so it was easy to contact them. The old man was called Old Devil Zhang on the spiritual net. Li Daocheng wanted to find Old Devil Zhang to find out where he had caught the ghost disciple. Because they had agreed beforehand, Li Daochong went to find old Devil Zhang as soon as he arrived at the south district of the Shadow Serene Street. Just like last time, there was a stall next to old Devil Zhang. He didn't care about the customers who came to look at the goods, and only focused on fiddling with the spirit brain in front of him. Li Daochong stood in front of the stall and took off his mask. Just as he was about to speak, old Devil Zhang slammed the table. Damn it, I made a mistake again. Let's try reversing the spirit sequence coding, Li Daochong said as he looked at the screen in front of old Devil Zhang's spirit brain. Is that so? Old Devil Zhang stared blankly for a moment. He didn't care who the speaker was. His turbid eyes stared at the spirit brain, and he immediately began to operate it. A few minutes later, old Devil Zhang said in amazement, it really is reversed. Brother, you're still the best. You can see the problem with just a glance. What do you want to buy? Halfway through his words, old Devil Zhang turned his head. When he saw Li Daochong, he stopped and laughed. Haha, so it's you. Young man, you came at the right time. Come and help me take a look at this spirit brain. Recently, it's been acting up again. It's always unstable. I've already lost several original blueprints. Li Daochong immediately took old Devil Zhang's spirit brain. After tapping on the keyboard a few times, he quickly found the problem. Although spirit brains and computers were very different, there were also similarities. Li Daochong's predecessor had a very solid foundation. After understanding the principles of the spirit brain, Li Daochong could easily find the problem with any spirit brain. In a few minutes, Li Daochong reconstructed the spirit brain's internal code and fixed all the loopholes. After old Devil Zhang took back the spirit brain and fiddled with it a few times, his eyes widened as he looked at Li Daochong in disbelief. Young man, you're really godly. I had several powerful spirit sequence masters in the Shadow Serene Square fix it, but they couldn't find the problem. You just casually fiddled with this spirit brain, and all the things that were lost inside were recovered. Just who did you learn from? Li Daochong laughed. Can't I learn without a teacher? Although it was a joke, old Devil Zhang could tell that Li Daochong wasn't willing to talk about it, so he didn't ask anymore. Young man, you've helped me a lot this time. Tell me, what do you want to buy? I'll give you a 50% discount like last time. Old Devil Zhang said straightforwardly. Senior, I don't want to buy anything this time. I want to ask, where did you catch these low-level dark ghosts? Li Daochong asked. What? Are you trying to steal this old man's business? Old Devil Zhang joked. How could I dare steal Senior's business? My master needs to catch a few big ghosts, and it's too dangerous outside the Seven-Ring Star field, so he wants to find a safer place to catch them. Li Daochong casually found an excuse. Hee, as long as you're not trying to steal my business, then that's good. Young man, you've helped me a lot this time, so this old man will make an exception and tell you. However, aside from your master, you can't reveal any information to anyone else. Otherwise, don't blame this old man for falling out with you. Old Devil Zhang was still smiling at the beginning, but his face sank as he spoke with a hint of warning. Senior, don't worry. This junior knows that this matter is very important, so I won't reveal it to anyone else. Li Daochong promised. This old man likes you and trusts you. With your mastery of the spirit brain, I don't think you're some shady person. After old Devil Zhang finished speaking, he looked around and approached Li Daochong. He whispered, even if I tell you where that place is, you won't be able to enter. Wait for me. I'm going to make a trip there to replenish my supplies. Business has been pretty good recently, and someone has reserved 15 green ghosts. You can help me out. After saying that, old Devil Zhang began to tidy up his stall. It didn't take long for him to put everything into his storage bag. The old man and the young man walked out of the movie market together. Old Devil Zhang's feet moved faster and faster. Li Daochong quietly followed behind. After walking for a while, old Devil Zhang's face revealed a hint of surprise. Old Devil Zhang wanted to test Li Daochong, but he didn't expect this kid to be able to follow him without a change in expression. Old Devil Zhang couldn't help but become curious about Li Daochong's identity. He was proficient in the spirit brain and had extraordinary strength. It was impossible for him to be unknown on Blue Bay Star. However, no matter how old Devil Zhang searched his memories, he couldn't find any information about Li Daochong. This young man seemed to have appeared out of thin air. 10 minutes later, the old man and the young man arrived in front of an ancient castle. Li Daochong's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. Wasn't this the Deadwood Castle? The first time he came to the underground city, he was brought here by Ouyang Qian. Young man, this old man still doesn't know your name. Can you tell me? I can't always call you young man, right? Old Devil Zhang stopped and asked. My surname is Li. My name is Chong. Li Daochong immediately replied, but he removed the word Dao from his name. Old Devil Zhang nodded. Li Chong, when we go in, don't stray too far from me. This castle has become more and more strange recently. The spatial fluctuations inside are very unstable. Only one of the spatial gates is orderly. The others are all chaotic spatial gates. If you accidentally enter, even a Jindan cultivator won't be able to return. Chapter 99. Li Daochong followed Old Devil Zhang into the Deadwood Castle. After several months, the situation inside the castle was even weirder than before. Li Daochong felt that the space here was chaotic, as if it was constantly changing. Old Devil Zhang's route seemed to be random, but in fact, it was very knowledgeable. Every step was very precise, avoiding those invisible but dangerous space vortexes. After Li Daochong entered the Deadwood Castle, he felt extremely unsafe. He could very clearly see the changes in the flow of space. Even without Old Devil Zhang, Li Daochong could also smoothly avoid the space vortexes. Li Daochong suddenly thought of a term that Chu Qianyue often mentioned during the special training, space perception. At that time, Li Daochong didn't quite understand what Chu Qianyue meant, but now he finally understood. Chu Qianyue taught him more than he imagined. At this time, Li Daochong realized that he was just a frog at the bottom of the well. He knew nothing about the outside world. Soon, Old Devil Zhang brought Li Daochong to an abandoned room on the 3rd floor of the Deadwood Castle. The space here seemed to be flowing. Old Devil Zhang jumped forward and finally landed in the left corner of the room. Li Daochong did the same. One old and one young stood facing the wall. Li Daochong could clearly see the vortex on the wall. Otherwise, he would definitely think that Old Devil Zhang must have made a mistake. Li Chong, are you ready? Old Devil Zhang suddenly asked. Ready, Li Daochong replied. Old Devil Zhang chuckled. He grabbed Li Daochong's back and leaped toward the wall. The old man and the young man crashed into the wall. However, the scene of them crashing into the wall didn't appear. The two disappeared into the wall. It was as if no one had ever appeared in the abandoned room on the 3rd floor of the Deadwood Castle. Only the occasional unstable space made a slight sound. Sheng? Li Daochong only felt that his eyes were flashing. The surrounding scenery was moving at high speed. He felt a tingling sensation on his body. In just a few seconds, his eyes turned black and he entered a dusky space. We're here. Li Daochong felt strange. This place did not feel like a secret area or a planet. It felt like another room in Deadwood Castle, except that the walls were all made of metal. Welcome to the Evil Spirit Universe Shuttle. Old Ghost Zhang smiled. Evil Spirit Universe Shuttle? Li Daochong was confused. That's right. On the other side of that naturally formed portal is this giant shuttle that has been floating on the starship for who knows how many years, Old Devil Zhang replied. Li Daochong revealed a look of disbelief. He hadn't expected Old Ghost Zhang to capture Dark Ghost on a space shuttle. The temperature here was obviously much lower, and the walls and ground were covered in a thick layer of frost. The temperature was -30 to -40 degrees Celsius, but the surroundings were not completely dark. Some light from the outside would shine in through the gaps. Fortunately, Li Daochong had successfully advanced to the 10th layer of qi refining, and his spiritual root had already taken shape. It was more than enough for him to withstand such low temperatures. If it was -70 to -80 degrees Celsius, Li Daochong would not be able to withstand it. He would have to circulate his spirit qi to resist the cold. There was nothing else he could do. Old Ghost Zhang was about to support Li Daochong with a layer of insulation, but when he turned to look at Li Daochong, he realized that the kid was not afraid of such low temperatures at all. Old Ghost Zhang's old face revealed a look of surprise. What was this kid's cultivation level? He looked like he was only 18 or 19 years old. This place was not as simple as the low temperature. Everywhere was filled with the aura of death. The entire space shuttle had been occupied by dark ghosts for hundreds of years. Not a single person on board was left alive. They had all become food for the dark ghost. If it was just the low temperature, it would not be strange for this young man to be able to resist Old Ghost Zhang. But such a thick aura of death did not make him feel uncomfortable at all. That was very impressive. Old Ghost Zhang could sense that Li Daocheng's aura was around the 7th layer of qi refining. However, his telekinesis could not sense the Jindan realm, so it was impossible to be accurate. Li Daocheng's current state was definitely above the 7th layer of qi refining. When Old Ghost Zhang first came here, he had brought a group of people. The situation was unclear, and they were cannon fodder. Naturally, he had to bring a few kids to scout the way. At the time, 2 of the 7th layer of qi refining could not withstand it. Li Chou, not bad. You're not even afraid of such a strong aura of death. You don't look very old. Your future is limitless. With a helper like you, this old man can try to catch a few big ghosts today, Old Ghost Zhang praised. Senior, you must be joking. Li Daocheng calmly replied. As soon as he entered, he immediately expanded his telekinesis. In order to increase his accuracy, he had to focus. Everything within a 300-meter radius was within Li Daocheng's grasp. Li Daocheng was shocked. The 300-meter radius was actually within the range of the space shuttle. Just how big was this space shuttle? Could it be the giant space shuttle? It was as big as Small Town. It was a giant space shuttle used for transportation and colonization. Li Chong, follow this old man and don't go astray. This space shuttle has a diameter of over 2 kilometers, and its internal structure is rather complicated. So far, the area we've explored is still considered safe. We've set up a spirit formation here, so big ghosts and above cannot enter. If you accidentally go out of the safe area, it'll be hard to say. I heard that there are evil ghosts outside the safe area. If you run into them, it'll be troublesome. Old Ghost Zhang reminded. Understood, Senior. Li Daocheng agreed. Old Ghost Zhang said as he walked out of the room. Li Daocheng followed behind him. Outside was a dark corridor. It was no more than 3 meters wide, and there were rows of doors on both sides. Old Ghost Zhang obviously came here often and was very familiar with the terrain. He led Li Daocheng into a large hall. A few wandering ghosts floated at one end of the hall. Sensing life, they howled hungrily and pounced. Old Ghost Zhang casually threw out a black silk net, catching all the little ghosts in one fell swoop. Crackle, crackle. The black net flickered, and the ghosts flickered. Soon, there was no sound, and they floated up and down silently. Old Ghost Zhang retracted the net and put the ghosts into a yellow bag at his waist. He patted it and said, there's already a harvest. I can sell them for tens of thousands. As they walked forward, Li Daocheng became a spectator. The black net in Old Ghost Zhang's hands seemed to have no end. He caught all the dark ghosts he saw, from the small ones to the big ones, and they were all sucked into the yellow bag. Li Daocheng was envious, but he couldn't absorb the dark ghosts in front of Old Ghost Zhang, so he could only watch. 10 minutes later, Old Ghost Zhang's harvest was quite bountiful. There were at least 30 dark ghosts of various levels in the bag at his waist. Old Ghost Zhang saw that he had harvested enough and said, Li Chong, there's a restaurant not far ahead. There are 2 powerful ghosts inside, the Black Fiend and the Black Fiend. They're not easy to deal with. Last time, I almost fell. Killing them is easy, but capturing them alive is not so easy. Help me, and if you can capture them, I'll give you 30,000. What do you think? Sure, Senior Zhang. Tell me what you need me to do. Li Daocheng naturally wouldn't refuse money. Old Ghost Zhang looked uncertainly at Li Daocheng and asked, I need some time to lay down the Black Fiend. Help me stall the Black Fiend, and I'll stall the Black Fiend. It'll take about 5 minutes. Can you hold them off? I'll try, Li Daocheng replied. Dark ghosts of the great ghost level not only had high intelligence, but their strength had also greatly increased. With Li Daocheng's current strength, Dealing with a top-level green ghost was a bit difficult, let alone a great ghost. But for some reason, Li Daocheng wasn't afraid at all when he saw dark ghosts. On the contrary, he was very excited. The fragrance of dark ghosts made him subconsciously lick his lips. Old Ghost Zhang didn't hesitate. He didn't care whether Li Daocheng could really stall them or not. He took out a banner and shot forward. Li Daocheng curled his lips and followed. Soon, they arrived at the restaurant. The death energy inside was clearly thicker than outside. The restaurant was pitch black, and one couldn't even see one's fingers. Ghostly screams occasionally came from the darkness. They weren't loud, but they made one's hair stand on end. With a breath, white mist curled up, and the temperature dropped a few degrees. Old Ghost Zhang didn't hesitate at all. He lightly shouted and heavily slammed his palm on the ground. With a bang, a wave of energy spread out. He then took out the banner in his hand and stuck it in front of the restaurant. He then warned, Li Cheng, be careful. As soon as he said this, two figures, one large and one small, shot out from the darkness of the restaurant. Li Daocheng was given a fright. He hadn't expected the dark ghosts here to be so ferocious. Li Daocheng subconsciously took 2 steps back, an ice talisman ready in his hand. Just as he was about to send it out, there was a loud bang. The mother-child black fiends slammed into an invisible wall and bounced back. Li Daocheng realized that the banner old Ghost Zhang had planted in the restaurant had emitted a stream of energy. That invisible wall had been created by this stream of energy. Old Ghost Zhang aimed a net at the larger black fiend, but as soon as the net covered the female black fiend, there was a pop as the black net was corroded by death energy. The female black fiend seemed to be agitated and instantly shot back, transforming into a black streak of light. Bang! There was a dull thud. Thump! The banner stuck in the ground toppled over. What? Old Ghost Zhang cried out in alarm. He hadn't expected that the heavenly net formation he had so carefully designed would be knocked over by the female black fiend. As old Ghost Zhang spoke, the female black fiend lunged at him, a pair of claws made of black energy swiping at him. At the same time, the female black fiend also lunged at Li Daocheng. Old Ghost Zhang shouted, Li Cheng, the heavenly net formation flag is broken and can't set up the spiritual array. Run, these 2 mother-child black fiends. I can only kill them. While shouting, a wooden sword appeared in old Ghost Zhang's hand and stabbed at the female black fiend. Boom! Crack! The wooden sword broke before it even touched the female black fiend. Bang! Old Ghost Zhang was sent flying by the female black fiend. If he hadn't been wearing a middle-grade human rank robe, he would have suffered internal injuries. Old Ghost Zhang spat. His old eyes were full of anger. If he hadn't been injured before, how could a mere female black fiend knock him away? It was simply a disgrace. On the other side, Li Daocheng's ice talisman was the foundation, and the ice-cold spirit instantly wrapped around the female black fiend. Li Daocheng stepped forward, stretched out his hand, and the Zamadeo appeared in his hand. He flicked it up. Zung! Silver light flashed. The female black fiend's body was split in half. Old Ghost Zhang stared at this scene with his mouth agape. The old man suspected that his eyes were playing tricks on him. An 18 or 19-year-old youth, who was at most in the 8th or 9th level of chi refining, actually split the female black fiend in half. However, in just the blink of an eye, the female black fiend's severed body merged back together and returned to its original state. The black fiend was invisible and could be reborn infinitely. It was impossible to cut it off. Chapter 100. Li Daocheng coldly looked at Zihei Sha. Just now, he had used all of his strength. First of all, Li Daocheng did not dare to be careless when facing a great ghost dark ghost. If he could be ruthless, he would not let it go easily. Li Daocheng had not only used all of his strength in this attack, but he had also used the first layer of the 9-split saber art. Crushed stone and split the earth. The saber energy contained spiritual energy and had a chain effect. Zihei Sha's body had just healed, but before it could completely reconnect, it was split apart by the saber energy. Old Devil Zhang was dumbfounded as he looked at Zhe Sha's state. His old eyes were filled with shock as he turned to look at Li Daochong. To have such an amazing cultivation technique at such a young age, he was simply a monster. When Li Daochong had called him senior, Old Devil Zhang had been very happy and felt that he was worthy of being called senior. But now, Old Devil Zhang felt his face burning, and he felt ashamed. Old Devil Zhang was at the late stage of qi gathering, but he did not know such a high-end cultivation technique. Of course, as a spirit array master, he was not a close combat cultivator and relied on tricks to fight. Whether it was against humans or ghosts, Old Devil Zhang rarely fought head-on. He relied on magic treasures and spirit arrays to fight. As for Li Daochong, it was very rare for Old Ghost Zhang to fight He Sha head-on. Zhe Sha's body exploded into more than 10 pieces, but the death aura on its body showed no signs of weakening. A beep came from Li Daochong's knowledge sea, and a wave of power immediately came out. The fragments of Zhe Sha were like some kind of great tonic in his eyes. Li Daochong strode forward and reached out, grabbing one of the fragments. Pa! The fragment disappeared, absorbed into his body. Killed Zhe Sha's fragment. Obtained soul power, converted into spiritual energy. A notification sounded. Immediately, the spiritual energy in Li Daochong's body increased. Even if it was just a fragment of a great ghost-level soul power, it was still many times more than the low ghost-level soul power. Li Daochong's eyes flashed, and he was overjoyed. There was actually such a thing. It turned out that he could convert soul power without having to swallow it whole. Wasn't the 9-split saber art tailor-made for him? This scene was not seen by Old Devil Zhang because the female Black Fiend pounced on him again, and the Black Fiend Qi enveloped Old Devil Zhang. Old Ghost Zhang shrieked as another banner appeared in his hand. He shouted, "Soul Sealing Banner, Soul Power Seal." A brown python slithered out of the banner and tangled with the black qi released by the female Black Fiend. Old Devil Zhang finally escaped, but when he looked at Li Daochong's side, the Black Fiend spirit body was on the verge of collapse, as if it would collapse at any time. Li Daochong did not expect that his strength would increase so quickly after he mastered the 9-split saber technique. A 10th layer qi refinement cultivator was able to deal with a black demon effortlessly. Only now did Li Daochong realize that he had an innate advantage over Dark Ghost, as if they were his natural enemy. Against Dark Ghost, Li Daochong could not feel the suppression of the death qi. He had a natural resistance to it. Thus, if Dark Ghost wanted to attack Li Daochong, the only way was to use an effective spirit body attack. Devouring, low-level death arts, illusions, charms, and death qi were all useless. Under normal circumstances, a 10th layer qi refinement cultivator would be powerless against a Dark Ghost at the Great Ghost level, even if it was the lowest level. Just the death qi alone was enough to deal with. Before they could even get close, they would be suppressed by the death qi and unable to move. Only an early-stage qi condensation cultivator could contend with a great ghost-level Dark Ghost. Li Daochong was clearly an exception. In just a few seconds, Li Daochong absorbed all 6 of the Black Fiend's fragments without leaving a single trace behind. His spirit qi had increased significantly, almost reaching a quarter of the 10th layer. Li Daochong was overjoyed. If he could absorb the entire Black Fiend, he would enter the mid-stage of the 10th layer qi refinement. At this moment, Zhe Sha let out a terrified scream. Just now, he had treated the living thing in front of him as a delicious meal, but now he was scared out of his wits, like a mouse seeing a cat. The Black Fiend spirit body that had healed back together was obviously much dimmer, and the strength of the death aura was much weaker. Wanna run? No way. Li Daochong lightly shouted, and a fire talisman shot out from his hand. Wait! Old Ghost Zhang shouted, but it was too late. That fire talisman turned into a ball of flame that engulfed the weakened Black Fiend. Almost at the same time, Old Devil Zhang threw out a ghost weeping net to cover the flame. In 3 to 4 seconds, the flame burned out, and the black evil spirit's body became transparent, turning into a grayish-white color. The two empty green eyes had lost their luster. When old Ghost Zhang saw that the black fiend was not completely destroyed, his old face lit up with joy, and he called out softly, "Return." The weeping ghost net immediately closed. Constriction? Steam bun with bright pine grains? Invading Yong. Advising Fei He and favoring Gugo Zi? What? Bing, Ing Wang Yu Yetting Boom. With a loud sound, old Ghost Zhang's soul-sealing flag exploded into pieces. The brown python that was entangled with the female black fiend collapsed and disappeared. Old Ghost Zhang didn't even have time to be happy about getting a black fiend before he lost another soul-sealing flag. "My flag, Sai." Old Ghost Zhang cried out in pain. A soul-sealing flag was refined for at least 200,000 Federation coins, and it also took a lot of time to refine. One gain and one loss. Old Ghost Zhang had worked for nothing. The black fiend that was caught and had its soul erased wasn't in its peak state. The remaining dead souls could be sold for 100,000 Federation coins, which was already not bad. Old Ghost Zhang felt his heart ache, and he screamed, "Fuck your mother! If this old man doesn't take you down today, I'll change my surname tomorrow." As he spoke, a bronze mirror appeared in old Ghost Zhang's hand, and he pointed it at the female black fiend, chanting, "Supreme Limitless, borrowing the power of heaven and earth. With a flash of light, demons and ghosts exterminate." Bang! A golden light shot out from the bronze mirror. "Wei Zhao flattery fu shi shi." "Ah!" The female black fiend screamed in pain, and it echoed in the enclosed space, making Li Daocheng's head dizzy. The female black fiend suddenly turned into a cloud of black fog, with a twisted ghost face in the middle, and it opened its mouth to pounce on old Ghost Zhang. "What?" Old Ghost Zhang screamed. This female black fiend wasn't even afraid of the light from the demon expelling mirror. Old Ghost Zhang's internal injuries hadn't healed, and he couldn't avoid the female black fiend's desperate counterattack, and he was about to be bitten by the giant mouth. Whoosh! A figure appeared in a flash. Zung! Silver light flashed, and old Ghost Zhang only felt a flash. When he opened his eyes again, the female black fiend had been split in half, and it was wriggling in pain in the air. Li Daocheng maintained the momentum after the attack, and he chanted in his heart. 9-split saber technique, second stage. Mountains collapsed, and the earth cracked. Li Daocheng consumed a lot of spiritual energy in his body, and he released most of his spiritual energy in just one move. The female black fiend quickly recovered, and it opened its ghost claws to grab Li Daocheng on the side. It was bound to tear this ant who dared to attack it into pieces. Li Daocheng didn't move, and he didn't even look at the female black fiend. His eyes were slightly slanted, revealing a trace of ridicule, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. The ghost claws hadn't touched Li Daocheng yet. With a bang, the female black fiend's body that had just healed exploded into pieces. Old Ghost Zhang, who had wanted to protect Li Daocheng, was completely stunned at this moment, and he was petrified in place. Chapter 101. Old Ghost Zhang was shocked, but he didn't forget to capture the female black fiend. The female black fiend had been split into 20 to 30 pieces by Li Daocheng. Although the death energy didn't decrease, it didn't have any fighting power before it healed. These pieces were shining Federation coins in old Ghost Zhang's eyes. He didn't have time to be shocked, and directly took out the ghost weep net to harvest the pieces. Without batting an eyelid, Li Daocheng reached out and grabbed a few of the fragments that were closest to him and absorbed them. Killed 5 female black fiend pieces. Soul power gained. Host has leveled up to level 11. With a boom, the spirit energy in Li Daocheng's sea of consciousness gathered. The spirit root that was originally just an embryonic form quickly wriggled, and the 9 meridians completely merged to form a spirit root. Li Daocheng only felt that his body was full. He couldn't feel better if he didn't spit out. His whole body was indescribably comfortable, like he was suddenly enlightened. After absorbing the 2 ghost pieces, he directly broke through to Qi Refinement level 11. The amount of spirit energy converted from the female black fiend's dead soul fragments was shocking. If not Li Daochong wouldn't have been able to level up so easily. The amount of spirit energy needed to go from Qi Refinement level 10 to Qi Refinement level 11 was shocking. Just now, one of the 5 pieces that Li Daochong obtained just happened to be the female Black Fiend's soul core. It was like a blind cat catching a dead mouse. The remaining pieces were all taken into the Ghost Weep net by the greedy old Ghost Zhang in order to not let the female Black Fiend counterattack. Old Ghost Zhang used a fire talisman to burn more than 20 pieces one by one, but this burn almost burned all of the pieces. When old Ghost Zhang took a look, his old eyes bulged and snot flowed out of his nostrils. He looked at Li Daochong with a pained expression. "Li Chong, can't you take it easy? You broke that dead ghost's soul core in one hit. The remaining pieces together are not even 1/3 of the original dead soul power. They can't be sold for a good price." Old Ghost Zhang wanted to cry. After all this time, it would be good if the mother and son Black Fiends could be sold for 300,000. It only offset his loss. Loss. Old Ghost Zhang complained in his heart. Li Daochong smiled and said, "Senior, I'm sorry. Junior didn't notice." At this moment, Li Daochong addressed him as Senior, causing old Ghost Zhang's heart to skip a beat. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Brotherly, you can't do that. You have such great ability. This old man can't accept you calling me Senior. From now on, you could just call me Old Ghost Zhang." If Old Ghost Zhang wasn't injured, he could also deal with the mother-child Black Fiends alone, but it would take some effort. He definitely wouldn't be as relaxed as Li Daochong. Li Daochong was not pretentious and nodded with a smile. In the cultivation world, titles were not based on age. Whoever was stronger was the senior. Li Tianyang was only in his 40s at that time. A bunch of old men in their 70s and 80s all fawned over him and called him Senior. Li Daochong's body was full of spirit qi and his hands were itching. He used his telekinesis to sense that there were dark ghosts in a room behind him. He turned around and rushed in. Before old Ghost Zhang could react, Li Daochong came out of the room with 3 green ghost-level dark ghosts in his hand. He threw them to old Ghost Zhang and said, "Here you go." Old Ghost Zhang was a bit embarrassed, but for the sake of money, he didn't care about his old face. He erased the soul consciousness of the 3 dark ghosts and put them away. In the next hour, old Ghost Zhang followed behind Li Daochong and caught a few dozen dark ghosts without any effort. Old Ghost Zhang was overjoyed. He was rich. He was rich. With so many dark ghosts, he could sell them for at least 1,000,000 Federation coins. He had earned back all his losses. When he returned to Deadwood Castle, old Ghost Zhang's ghost cage bag was bulging. He had made a lot of money. Brotherly, with your skills, making money is like playing around. You have to take care of this old man in the future. Old Ghost Zhang didn't forget to flatter him as he walked out of Deadwood Castle. A Qi condensation cultivator fawning over a Qi condensation cultivator. It must be strange in the eyes of others. Li Daochong didn't help old Ghost Zhang hunt dark ghosts for free. He had his own plans. There were too many people in the underground city, and it wasn't convenient for him to show his face. Old Ghost Zhang looked like a veteran who had been in the underground city for many years. He must know the underground city like the back of his hand. Seeing how arrogant he was in the movie market, Li Daochong didn't believe that he didn't have some skill. First, he would bribe old Ghost Zhang. In the future, Li Daochong could buy things from him in the underground city, and he wouldn't have to show his face everywhere. Before the competition began, Li Daochong needed to upgrade his Zamadeo in addition to cultivation. Otherwise, the heavy silver essence crystal in his hand would be wasted. If he upgraded his Zamadeo to the Earth rank, Li Daochong's strength would increase again. However, just one heavy silver essence crystal wasn't enough. He needed many other materials. Li Daochong originally wanted to use the equipment exchange system in the hot-blooded upgrader to obtain materials. However, obtaining soul power was very slow, and he didn't have a better way at the moment. Li Daochong wanted to buy the remaining materials in the underground city. When it came to refining magic treasures, Li Daochong was basically illiterate. Other than wanting old Ghost Zhang to be his purchasing agent, Li Daochong also wanted him to help him refine his Zamadeo. Old Ghost Zhang, do you know how to refine? Li Daochong casually asked. He had seen old ghost Zhang use his spirit brain to design a pattern. He guessed that old ghost Zhang should know, but he still needed to confirm it. Brotherly, I'm not as good as you when it comes to killing ghosts, but when it comes to refining, this old man can be ranked second in the entire underground city. Old ghost Zhang's eyes revealed a hint of pride. However, in Li Daochong's eyes, he found it somewhat funny. Who's the first? Li Daochong asked. The first naturally belongs to old ghost Yin Qing of the Shadow Secluded Square. However, he is stronger than me mainly because his cultivation has reached the foundation establishment stage. If I were to reach the foundation establishment stage, even old ghost Yin would have to admit defeat. Old ghost Zhang boasted. Then can you refine an earth rank magic treasure? Li Daochong continued to ask. Of course. Old ghost Zhang was talking excitedly just now, and this word came out his mouth. However, he quickly stopped and paused before saying, of course not. This old man suffered a serious injury in the past and is now half crippled. At most, I can refine a peak human rank magic treasure. That's my limit, unless old ghost Zhang stopped talking halfway. Unless what? Li Daochong asked. Unless I have good materials. If this old man's luck isn't bad, I might be able to refine an earth rank magic treasure. Old ghost Zhang replied without much confidence. Li Daochong curled his lips. He couldn't rely on luck. There was only one heavy silver essence crystal. If he used it, it would be gone. He had to succeed. The old man and the young man walked for a while. Old ghost Zhang was impatient to go to the Shadow Secluded Market. Seeing that Li Daochong was about to leave, he said, Brother Li, today's dark ghost capture was mostly due to you. This old man only acted as a porter. This mini dark ghost can be sold for a lot of money. When we get the goods, you take 70% and I take 30%. How about it? I don't want it. Li Daochong flatly refused. You don't want it? Old ghost Zhang stared at Li Daochong with his mouth wide open. Yes, I don't want it. It's all yours. However, I need you to help me raise the grade of this blade to high human rank. Li Daochong had a smile on his face as he took out the Zamadeo and handed it to old ghost Zhang. That's it. Old ghost Zhang didn't believe that a pie would fall from the sky. He took the Zamadeo from Li Daochong's hand and looked at it. He originally thought that it would be a dual attribute magic treasure, but it turned out to be an ordinary mid-human rank magic treasure. With his level, it would be too easy to raise the grade. Yes, that's it. Li Daochong nodded. Haha, no problem. Since Brother Li is straightforward, this old man won't be polite. Don't worry, give me half a month. I will definitely forge this saber of yours into the strongest human rank magic treasure. Old ghost Zhang patted his chest. All right, I'll come find you in half a month. Chapter 102. For the next half a month, Li Daochong spent his time in the underground training room of the old mansion and the underground city of Deadwood Castle. With old ghost Zhang's help, Li Daochong was able to enter the Titanic space shuttle full of nether ghosts by himself with his powerful spatial perception. Although Li Daochong was somewhat immune to dark ghosts, he wasn't so conceited as to think that he could travel freely in the giant spirit space shuttle the size of a small town. According to old Devil Zhang's description, Li Daochong wandered around the safety zone of the spiritual array, never stepping out of the line of defense. Dwarf dark ghosts were useless to Li Daochong. No matter if he killed or absorbed them, they wouldn't produce any spiritual energy. Small ghosts were only slightly useful to small ghost generals, but they were negligible. Killing hundreds of them would only produce a sliver of spiritual energy. Only green ghosts were useful to Li Daochong. After the dead souls were converted into spiritual energy, he could feel an obvious increase. But at the 11th level of Qi refinement, Li Daochong's spiritual energy requirement increased again. It was more than double the total of all the spiritual energy he had before. With each level, the difficulty increased exponentially. This was why there were billions of cultivators, but very few could truly become cultivators. Perhaps less than 1 in 10,000. The fragments produced by the mother and child black fiends, the 10th level of Qi refinement, were enough for Li Daocheng to advance by 1 level. But at the 11th level of Qi refinement, Li Daocheng entered the giant spirit space shuttle every day to kill dark ghosts. After half a month, at least several thousand dark ghosts had died at Li Daocheng's hands. Small ghosts accounted for more than half, and the rest were green ghosts. He also killed 5 large ghosts. But Li Daocheng felt that there was still a long way to go before he reached the Qi condensation stage. However, his spiritual roots had been strengthened and consolidated during this time. Most of these dark ghosts couldn't pose a threat to Li Daocheng. Only the large ghosts could make Li Daocheng take them seriously. But after repeated mechanical sweeps, Li Daocheng's understanding of the 9-split saber technique improved. It could be said that he had reached the point of perfection. The power of the saber was like a thunderclap. Once the saber was out, the ghosts would be destroyed. The hidden power of the saber was endless. Wherever the saber passed, no ghosts would be left. Li Daocheng had already killed most of the dark ghosts in the safe zone. All that remained were weak dwarf ghosts that he couldn't be bothered to kill. Half a month later, Li Daocheng came to the movie market again. This time, he did not enter the market. Old Devil Zhang asked him to meet him at the entrance of the movie market. Li Daocheng was a junior member and could only enter the film market. The entrance to the first floor was separated by a light screen. On one side was the entrance to the movie market, and on the other side was the magnificent counter of the Serene house. Old Devil Zhang was standing at the entrance of the light screen. When he saw Li Daocheng come in, he immediately beckoned Li Daocheng over. Li Daocheng looked at the entrance of the movie market suspiciously. He did not know why Old Devil Zhang had chosen to meet here, so he walked over. Li Daocheng walked in front of Old Devil Zhang. The old man smiled and pulled Li Daocheng into the light screen. Old Devil, I'm only a junior member. I can't go in. Li Daocheng hesitated. Follow me, and you can enter anywhere in the underground city. Old Devil Zhang said proudly. This time, it was Li Daocheng's turn to be a little confused. He had thought that Old Devil Zhang might not be as simple as he seemed, but he did not expect him to be so complicated. Being able to go anywhere in the underground city meant that he had a big background. Seeing Li Daocheng's look of disbelief, Old Devil Zhang straightened his back and said, "Brother Li, don't worry. This old man won't trick you." Then, Old Devil Zhang stepped into the light screen and pulled Li Daocheng in as well. The light screen did not block them, nor did the alarm sound. There were more than 10 counters on the first floor of the Serene house. The lights inside were bright, and behind each counter was a beautiful receptionist who was wearing sexy clothes and revealing just the right amount of skin. When Li Daocheng was pulled in by Old Devil Zhang, the beautiful receptionist inadvertently glanced at Li Daocheng, regardless of whether they were serving customers or had nothing to do. When these beautiful receptionists saw that Li Daocheng was so young, they were all shocked. Old Devil Zhang pulled Li Daocheng directly to the second floor. There were 2 big men in uniform guarding the staircase on the second floor. Seeing the 2 fierce-looking big men, Li Daocheng frowned slightly. Using his telekinesis, he found that the 2 big men were masters of Qi refining stage 9. However, the 2 guards had such a cultivation level. It was obvious that the Serene house was very powerful in the underground city. "Hello, Old Zhang." When the 2 big men saw Old Devil Zhang, they respectfully greeted him. One of them enthusiastically opened the door for Old Devil Zhang and Li Daocheng to enter the second floor. When they reached the second floor, Li Daocheng thought that it was enough. Who would have thought that Old Devil Zhang would go up to the third floor? On this floor, there was a young man standing guard. This young man looked to be in his 20s. When Li Daocheng probed him, he was slightly shocked. This person's cultivation level was about the same as his own, but a bit more profound. It seemed that he had already touched the threshold of the early stage of Qi gathering. When the young man saw Old Devil Zhang, he was also very respectful. He personally opened the door to the third floor. When Li Daocheng passed by, the young man showed a trace of surprise. When they entered the third floor, it was no longer a hall. Instead, it was divided into private rooms. Old Devil Zhang led Li Daochong into the innermost room. After entering, Li Daochong's eyes twitched. The room was much bigger than it looked from the outside. It was about 200 square meters. There were many spiritual brains placed against the wall. In the middle of the room was a metal furnace. There was a slight rumbling sound coming from the furnace. Old Devil Zhang came to a long table. There were a lot of things on the table in a mess. There were pieces of metal, wood, jade, and other things. In addition to this, there was a rectangular wooden box on the table. Old Devil Zhang opened the box. Immediately, a wave of heat came out from the inside. A long silver blade was placed inside. It was Li Daochong's Zamadeo. The appearance did not change, but Li Daochong felt that the blade was completely different. There was a layer of faint blue light attached to it. "Brother Li, your blade." Old Devil Zhang smiled as he took out the blade from the box and handed it to Li Daochong. Li Daochong took the blade. He could not help but wave it. With a buzzing sound, a blue flame swept through the void. "Good saber." Li Daochong held the long saber hilt and praised. The blade in his hand was much heavier than before. Li Daochong estimated that the Zamadeo's weight had increased by at least 30 jin. However, its size did not change at all. "Brother Li, after this blade has passed through my hands, there is no other blade in the human realm that can compare to it." Old Devil Zhang boasted. Half a month ago, when Old Devil Zhang said this, Li Daochong was somewhat skeptical. Now that the blade was in his hand, he believed it. "Old Devil Zhang, upgrading it once should cost a lot. How much is it?" Li Daochong did not want to take it for free. He did not want to owe a favor. Just as Old Devil Zhang was about to speak, there was a knock on the door, followed by a sweet voice. "Old Devil Zhang, are you here?" Being disturbed, Old Devil Zhang was a little unhappy. "No." The childish answer made Li Daochong not know whether to laugh or cry. "Old Devil Zhang, I'm sorry to disturb you. The owner wants to discuss something with you." Chapter 103. "Old Zhang, please, if you don't go, I won't be able to report back. The owner will punish me." A sweet voice came from outside the door. Old Ghost Zhang frowned, not at all moved by the sobbing outside the door, and was about to drive her away. Li Daochong said, "Old Zhang, you go, I'll wait for you." Old Ghost Zhang hated being disturbed, but he could not ignore Li Daochong's words. Li Daochong's strength was there. At such a young age, he could easily kill a great ghost-level dark ghost. If someone said that he did not have an expert guiding him, Old Ghost Zhang would not believe it. This expert was most likely a Jindan cultivator. If he could get closer to Li Daochong, he would have to get closer to that Jindan cultivator. Old Ghost Zhang knew the benefits of this. He had been looking for a way to cure his hidden illness all these years, but he had not made any progress. The expert behind Li Daochong might be able to help him. Old Ghost Zhang did not want to miss any chance to cure his hidden illness. In addition, Li Daochong was also very useful. Old Ghost Zhang thought that if he found a better place to catch ghosts, he could invite Li Daochong to go with him, greatly increasing his efficiency. Old Ghost Zhang was proficient in spiritual arrays and refining, but not in close combat. If he met a fierce ghost, he would not have the time to arrange a spiritual array. In most cases, he could only run away. This made Old Ghost Zhang very angry with his attainments in spiritual arrays, as long as he had enough time, not to mention a great ghost. Even if a fierce ghost came, he would be able to deal with it. The key was that he had to arrange a spiritual array. Old Ghost Zhang worked hard to reforge Li Daochong's Amadeo because he wanted to invite Li Daochong to go with him to a place outside the evil spirit flying shuttle safe zone, where there was a fiend bear great ghost, an extremely powerful great ghost level dark ghost. If there were no chi gathering middle stage cultivators, he would have to run for his life. The reason Old Ghost Zhang wanted to catch that fiend bear great ghost was because someone wanted to order a high-level great ghost's dead soul from him. The price, 3 million Federation coins. If Old Devil Zhang was alone, he wouldn't have thought about it. There was a lot of money, but he wouldn't risk his life to catch it. After seeing Li Daochong's strength last time, Old Devil Zhang's heart was moved. If this brat went with him, he should be able to capture the fiend bear big demon alive. Old Ghost Zhang could only nod and say, Brotherly, I'm sorry. Wait for me for a while. This old man will be back soon. Don't leave. I still have something to tell you. Li Daochong smiled and nodded. Only then did old Ghost Zhang say to the door, You go and report first. I'll be right there. Thank you, Mr. Zhang. The sweet voice outside the door replied with joy. Then, the sound of footsteps faded away. Brotherly, please wait in the reception room on the 3rd floor. This is not my private room. Outsiders are not allowed to stay here when I'm not present. Old Devil Zhang said apologetically. Okay. Li Daochong didn't mind. It was normal for there to be rules everywhere. Then, old Ghost Zhang took Li Daochong out of the room and came to an area in the middle of the 3rd floor. There were more than 10 sofas, coffee tables, and tables with some snacks on them. It was obviously a rest area. At this time, there was no one else in the rest area. After old Ghost Zhang settled Li Daochong down, he rushed to the 4th floor. Li Daochong had nothing to do. He sat on the sofa and closed his eyes to rest. He used his telekinesis to detect the upgraded Zamadeo in his storage bag. After a minute or two, Li Daochong opened his eyes and looked around curiously. There was a trace of ancient dark energy surging on a coffee table in front of him. Li Daochong was a little curious. He touched it with his telekinesis and found that the coffee table was made of red sandalwood. The shadow's secluded workshop was indeed rich. The tea table in the reception room was made of spiritual wood. Red sandalwood and silver were usually used to make exorcism artifacts. They were very valuable, and 1 kilogram could be sold for thousands of federal coins. Such a large tea table would cost at least a few $100,000. Under the coffee table was a carpet made of fire silkworm silk. Li Daochong was surprised. He squatted down and touched the carpet. His hand was warm. He couldn't help but feel a little pity that such a good thing was used as a foot cushion. It was a waste of God's gift. Just as Li Daochong squatted down and touched the carpet, there was a sound of footsteps in the corridor. A young man and a young woman in gorgeous robes walked into the lounge. The person who led them in was a middle-aged man in the robes of the Shadow Serene workshop. He was not tall and had a mustache. Li Daochong recognized the robe on the middle-aged man. It was a gray robe that only the middle-level staff of the Shadow Serene workshop wore. There was a sign on his chest that said, Floor Manager. The 3 people were stunned when they came in. They saw a young man in a sweater squatting next to the coffee table sneakily. He put his hand on the carpet and seemed to be tearing the silk. The middle-aged man was the floor manager of the 3rd floor. His name was Wang Jinlong. He had been in this position for 3 years. He was a slick person and was very good at currying favor. Wang Jinlong was stunned for a moment. He didn't attack immediately. Instead, he raised his wristwatch and scanned Li Daochong. It didn't matter. The wristwatch immediately alerted him. Wang Jinlong confirmed that the young man in front of him had no record of identity. Suddenly, the smile on his face disappeared. However, he still didn't attack. Instead, he glanced at the 2 distinguished guests beside him. The young man and the young woman came from the 2nd largest city in Blue Bay Star, Sea Star. Apart from Tianyuan City, Sea Star had the deepest heritage in Blue Bay Star. The 2 young men came from the Lin family, the most powerful family in Sea Star. Apart from the 4 major families in Blue Bay Star, the Lin family was the most powerful family. Lin Yuhan and Lin Jiahao came to the Shadow Serene workshop to purchase items for their family. Most of the items have been finalized. However, there were 2 items that were not enough in stock. Wang Jinlong had already sent people to the warehouse to pick up the items. It would take a while. Wang Jinlong took them to the lounge. Who would have thought that when he arrived, he would see a brat stealing things? Lin Yuhan hated people who reaped without sowing. When she heard the alarm from Wang Jinlong's wristwatch, she was even more certain that the young man in the shabby sweater was a thief. She immediately shouted, Stop! Where did this thief come from? How dare you sneak into the Shadow Serene workshop to steal things? Are you tired of living? Wang Jinlong, who hadn't said anything, stepped forward and grabbed Li Daochong when Lin Yuhan stopped him. He scolded angrily, Little thief, you've got guts. How did you sneak into the Shadow Serene workshop? Tell me, how did you get in? Do you have a spy? Wang Jinlong didn't believe that a little thief could sneak into the Shadow Serene workshop on his own. There had to be an insider. In the past 2 months, the Shadow Serene workshop had been missing items. Although they weren't valuable items, the entire tower would be emptied sooner or later. However, the investigation had been fruitless. Wang Jinlong was often scolded for his poor management. Let go. Li Daocheng was already annoyed by being called a little thief. Now that he was caught, his face turned cold. Wang Jinlong's cultivation was only at the 8th level of qi refinement. The 2 young men from the Lin family were at the 9th level of qi refinement. Chapter 104. When Wang Jinlong heard this, he was furious. Little thief, you are quite arrogant. You were caught red-handed, and yet you are still so arrogant. Do you have something to rely on? Li Daocheng reached out and pushed Wang Jinlong away. The latter didn't pay attention and was pushed back 2 steps. Lin Yuhan hated evil. Seeing that the little thief dared to make a move, she put on her gloves and rushed forward to punch Li Daocheng's face. Li Daocheng was really angry now. The moment these 3 people appeared, they inexplicably called him a thief. Based on what? Just because he was dressed shabbily? Looking down on others. Li Daocheng circulated his qi and punched out. Pung! With a muffled sound, Lin Yuhan retreated more than 10 steps until she was out of the resting room and hit the corridor wall. When Wang Jinlong saw this, his heart jumped. He didn't expect the little thief to be so powerful. Lin Yuhan was the pride of the younger generation in Beici City. When Lin Jiahao saw his cousin being pushed back, he was also angry. With a flash of silver light, a long sword appeared in his hand, and he slashed towards Li Daocheng. Wang Jinlong took in a cold breath. He wanted to stop it, but it was too late. Lin Jiahao's sword would split the little thief in half. Lin Jiahao's strength was on par with Lin Yuhan. But with a weapon in hand, the power wasn't something a fist could compare to. Before Wang Jinlong could react, Lin Jiahao's sword had already slashed down. Damn it, someone is going to die. I have to take the blame again. Wang Jinlong's temples were dripping with sweat. He was hoping that the little thief could dodge it. At this moment, Lin Yuhan rushed in again. When she saw Lin Jiahao's sword, she was shocked. That sword was refined by an elder of the Jian clan who specialized in refining weapons. It was a middle-grade human tier weapon. In fact, it was even more powerful than weapons of the same tier. It was incomparably sharp and could cut through iron like mud. No dodge, Lin Yuhan exclaimed. That little thief stood on the spot and didn't move. He watched as the sword slashed towards him. It was unknown if he didn't hear Lin Yuhan's exclamation or if he heard it. He couldn't dodge at all. The little thief's next move made Lin Yuhan and Wang Jinlong's hearts turn cold. He actually raised his right hand to block the sword. How could a fleshy arm block a transcendent artifact weapon? What a joke. That underling would be chopped off in a second. Pa! A crisp sound rang out. Li Daocheng's right index finger and middle finger gently pinched, and the swift and violent long sword instantly stopped. Lin Yuhan and Wang Jinlong widened their eyes in disbelief as they watched this scene. Lin Jiahao was stunned. He tried his best to press down on the sword. He even used his other hand, but the sword didn't budge at all. Li Daocheng flicked 2 of his fingers and snapped the sword in half. Then, he kicked Lin Jiahao, sending him flying backward and crashing into the sofa. Li Daocheng loosened his grip, and the broken sword fell to the ground. Wang Jinlong had a bad feeling. A small thief was not a small thief, but a big thief. He pressed the button on his wristwatch to sound the alarm. Lin Yuhan and Lin Jiahao both looked at Li Daocheng in astonishment. They were shocked. This little thief looked to be about the same age as them, but his strength completely overwhelmed them. As the descendants of the big families, they couldn't accept it for a while. If it was someone of the same age from the 4 big families, they could accept it. But the other party was not only unfamiliar, but also a small thief. How could they accept it? At this moment, a huge pressure came, and a big man in a black suit came in. This big man had a fierce look, a hideous scar on his face, and his aura was close to the late stage of qi gathering. He was actually a master in the middle stage of qi gathering. Not to mention the underground city, Even in the whole Tianyuan city, this strength was above average. Lin Yuhan and Lin Jiahao couldn't help but stand aside. A master in the middle stage of qi gathering was the level of a deacon in the Lin family. Some elders were only in the qi gathering stage. When Wang Jinlong saw Hong Yahai, the head of the security department of the secluded house, the tension on his face immediately eased. Hong Yahai's face was full of anger. Just now, he was receiving a lady in a private room on the second floor. The two of them exchanged glances and already had a preliminary intention. As long as he worked harder, the two of them would soon have sex. At the crucial moment, the alarm on his wristwatch rang. It was an orange alert, indicating that someone had invaded. As the head of the security department, Hong Yahai had to take full responsibility for the invasion of the secluded house. If the matter got out of hand, the owner of the secluded house would punish him, and he would lose his position as the head of the security department. A transfer order would be issued, and he would be directly sent out of the Six Rings galaxy. That would be terrible. No matter how bold Hong Yahai was, he didn't dare to be careless. Without saying anything, he left the lady behind and rushed forward. He even knocked over the teacup in the lady's hand. He didn't even have time to apologize before he left. Just like that, his romantic encounter was ruined. How could Hong Yahai not be angry? He wanted to see who dared to behave atrociously in the area he was in charge of. Manager Wang, who is the troublemaker? Hong Yahai asked in a rough voice. That guy stole something. Wang Jinlong pointed at Li Daochong and said, "How did he get in?" Hong Yahai stared and asked. The secluded house was heavily guarded, and even a fly would have a hard time flying in. "Chief Hong, I suspect there is a spy," Wang Jinlong said. "Could it be that girl, Zhang Jiao?" She wasn't the only one who didn't have an alibi when the ore was stolen. She was also present when the customer's wallet was stolen. She was also on duty when 10,000 yuan was missing from the counter. Hong Yahai immediately thought of the recent theft in the secluded house. It's possible. Wang Jinlong's eyes flashed. Zhang Jiao was transferred from other places and was now the deputy manager of the third floor. She was highly appreciated by the owner of the secluded house. Seeing that she was about to threaten his position, he had to suspect her first, regardless of whether she was the spy or not. Humph! Hong Yahai snorted coldly and pressed a button on his watch. He said angrily, "Listen up, whoever sees Zhang Jiao, immediately tell her to come to the lounge on the third floor. Everyone, gather on the third floor." As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere in the secluded house became tense. The sound of footsteps between the floors was continuous. Within a few minutes, more than 10 burly men in suits gathered together. They all looked nervous and didn't know what was going on. Then, a woman wearing a slightly revealing professional robe with a curvaceous figure appeared. Her face could not be considered beautiful, but there was a charming look in her eyes that made one's heart tremble. She was very flirtatious, and any man would not be able to resist her coquettish gaze. She was the Zhang Jiao that Hong Yahai mentioned. She was the favorite of the owner of the secluded house and the new sales expert of the secluded house. As long as she was involved, there was no customer that she couldn't get. "Section Chief Hong, why did you call me here?" Zhang Jiao asked with some dissatisfaction. "Don't play dumb in front of me. Did you let the thief in?" Hong Yahai questioned without distinguishing between right and wrong. Zhang Jiao was a stunner. Hong Yahai had thought about her before. At first, he even touched her, but in the end he was scolded by the owner of the secluded house and was slapped in public. From then on, he hated Zhang Jiao to the core and wanted to rape her first before killing her. "What thief?" Zhang Jiao was confused. "Him." Hong Yahai stood in front of Li Daochong and pointed at his nose, as if saying, "Don't pretend in front of me." "Who is he?" Zhang Jiao didn't know Li Daochong at all. Li Daochong, who had been watching the performance of these guys silently, frowned when he was slandered as a thief and pointed at him. "If you don't want to lose a finger, get out of here." As soon as he said that. Chapter 105. The lounge was silent. Like a deep sea. There was no sound for at least 2 seconds. Everyone looked at Li Daochong in astonishment. looking at this little thief who dared to speak rudely to Hong Yahai. Hong Yahai is a chi-gathering middle-stage cultivator, only 2 stages away from the Foundation establishment stage. His strength in the underground city is definitely considered as a master. There are no more than 10 people in the entire underground city who are more powerful than Hong Yahai. All of them are the leaders of the underground forces, the bosses, the CEO-level people. The most astonished person is naturally Hong Yahai himself. This little thief who is still wet behind the ears dares to talk to him like this. Ha! Hong Yahai suddenly looks up and laughs, and then suddenly lowers his head. Looking at Li Daochong, coldly says, "Little thief, this is the biggest joke I have heard this year. I'm afraid your brain is not very good, come. I'll put my finger here, I want to see if it will be missing." Bang! Hong Yahai's voice has not yet faded. A fire talisman shot out from Li Daochong's hand. At such a close distance, it instantly bombarded Hong Yahai's body. The 3rd level enhanced version of the fire talisman. The power can make a peak chi refining stage cultivator unable to bear, even seriously injuring them. But for a chi gathering stage cultivator, it is not enough to pose a threat, but can still cause pain. Despicable. Who would have thought that the little thief would actually fight just like that? He didn't play by the rules at all. Hong Yahai was careless. He took 2 steps back, but before he could stand firm, a silver light flashed. At that moment, Hong Yahai actually had a feeling that he was on the verge of death. A little guy in the chi refining stage actually made him a chi gathering stage expert. Feel this way, it is simply a disgrace. Hong Yahai stretched out his hand. A broadsword appeared in his hand. Clang! An ear-piercing sound rang out. Li Daochong's Amadeo fiercely chopped down on the broadsword. The rebound force made him take 3 steps back. Hong Yahai's wrist was numb. The web between his thumb and forefinger directly split open. Blood flowed out. This scene, everyone was once again stunned. Hong Yahai was actually injured? Lin Yuhan's mouth was wide open as she looked at Li Daochong in surprise. At this time, she was a little confused. This teenager who looked like he was only 18 or 19 years old was able to force her and her cousin to retreat, and was even able to injure a middle-stage chi-gathering cultivator. What kind of monster was that? How could he be so strong? Could he be one of the 2 prodigies from the Ghoul clan, or the House of Oku? Lin Yuhan was puzzled. How could such a person be a thief? Wang Jinlong looked at Hong Yahai with disdain in his eyes. He cursed in his heart. Trash. All you know is to lie on a woman's belly. Now, you can't even deal with a small thief. Hong Yahai glanced at the area between his thumb and index finger. Burning with rage, he roared, "Mother of Kur, you're courting death." Li Daochong retreated 3 steps. The blood in his body churned. The inner strength of a middle-stage chi-gathering realm cultivator was really powerful. Compared to the previous killer, it was much more powerful. If not for Li Daochong's cultivation base greatly improved, and the fact that he took the initiative, his sneak attack caught Hong Yahai off guard. But even so, the one who was forced to retreat was Li Daochong. As for the injury between Hong Yahai's thumb and index finger, it was not because of Li Daochong's profound inner strength, but because of the advantage of the cultivation method. The 9-split saber technique caused Hong Yahai to be injured. No matter how, it was able to injure a middle-stage chi-gathering realm cultivator. Even Li Daochong himself was a little surprised. The earth-level cultivation method was really powerful. Hong Yahai was battered and exhausted after 2 moves. Seeing so many people lose face, they became really angry. With a loud shout, the spiritual energy in his body swelled, and he lightly shouted, "Mountain Breaking Sword." Just as Hong Yahai made his move, Li Daochong had already taken out a fire talisman. The advantage of the fire talisman was that it could be fired by pulling the trigger. There was no need to store power, no need to use chi, it could be fired in an instant. The only drawback was that it was a pure consumable. It was difficult to make and difficult to obtain. This time, Li Daochong used the level 4 fire talismans he had just made. There were only 2 of them in total. Li Daochong knew very well that once Hong Yahai was prepared and got serious, he would not be able to block his attack. The only way to gain the upper hand was to make the first move. The power of a level 4 fire talisman was completely different. Even a Qi gathering realm cultivator would not be able to withstand it. Han Yahai had already seen the fire talisman in Li Daocheng's hand, but he did not care at all. How could a fire talisman of this level hurt him? But when the fire talisman turned into a fireball and flew towards him, Han Yahai felt that something was wrong. He could not dodge it even if he wanted to. Boom! There was a muffled sound. Han Yahai was sent flying backward, crashing heavily into the wall of the corridor more than 10 meters away. Li Daocheng's eyes twitched. In a hurry, Han Yahai changed the direction of the sword in his hand to block the fire talisman. The two forces canceled each other out. Otherwise, Han Yahai would have been sent flying out of the shadow tower. After the explosion, the lounge fell silent again. Everyone was stunned as they looked at Han Yahai, who had hit the wall and then bounced back to the ground. Bah! Han Yahai spat out a mouthful of saliva and stood up. He had been scared out of his wits just now. Although his face was still fierce, he looked at Li Daocheng with a hint of fear in his eyes. He inadvertently glanced at Li Daocheng's hand to see if there were any more fire talismans. Li Daocheng's lips curled. He did not disappoint Han Yahai. Another fire talisman appeared in his hand. Let's go together and take down this thief. Besides using fire talismans, there is nothing special about him. Han Yahai did not dare to take the risk and ordered. The group of guards did not dare to move. They were all cursing in their hearts. Damn it! Why don't you do it yourself? Even someone in the middle stage of the Qi gathering was sent flying. Wouldn't they be sending themselves to death if they went up? After the order was given, no one moved. A bunch of good-for-nothings. Didn't you hear what I said? Whoever doesn't go up will be fired. Han Yahai was furious. His words were effective. The dozen or so guards looked at each other and gritted their teeth. Even if they were injured, it would be considered a work injury, and they would be compensated handsomely. If they were fired, they would not get anything. After weighing the pros and cons, the group of guards made up their minds. Someone shouted and then rushed forward. Li Daocheng held his Zamadeo horizontally. The 9 cracks knife technique was about to be used. Stop! A shout came from outside the door. Zhang Lao walked into the lounge with a gloomy face. His wrinkled, old face was fuming with anger. What are you doing? Don't you know that I was discussing with the owner upstairs? Why are you making such a ruckus? Zhang Lao glanced around the room and questioned. Old Zhang, there's a thief stealing something. We're catching the thief. Wang Jinlong ran to old Ghost Zhang and said, What thief? The shadow-secluded house is heavily guarded. How could a thief sneak in? Zhang Lao questioned. Zhang Lao, I suspect that there is a mole who brought him in. Wang Jinlong hurriedly complained and looked at Zhang Jiao. Where is the thief? Zhang Lao's face became more and more unpleasant. Wang Jinlong pointed at Li Daocheng. Slap! Zhang Lao raised his hand and slapped Wang Jinlong. Wang Jinlong covered his face and looked at Zhang Lao in horror. He is a VIP. I brought him in. Are you saying that I am a mole? Zhang Lao slapped him and said in a low voice. Hiss! Wang Jinlong gasped. Han Yahai was dumbfounded. The group of guard wanted to cry, but had no tears. Lin Yuhan and Lin Jiahao were confused. VIP. Chapter 106. With Li Daocheng's age and clothes, no one would have thought that he would be a VIP. Anyone who could be a VIP of the Shadow Serene House was either rich or powerful. This guy was actually a VIP? Everyone was shocked. Wang Jinlong was dumbfounded. He looked at Li Daocheng with a confused face. His face was twisted and his legs were weak. Han Yahai's heart skipped a beat. He was completely stunned. He gritted his teeth and looked at Wang Jinlong. He wanted to rush up and twist this guy's head off. This time, he was going to die. Sung Jiao, who had been called over, looked at Li Daocheng with a surprised expression. She blinked her charming eyes. She hadn't expected a thief to become a VIP. She then smiled. Wang Jinlong had tried to trick her, but in the end, he had gone for wool and come home shorn. Sing Jiao was very happy, but she did not show it on her face. Mr. Zhang had a noble status in the Shadow Serene House. The owner called him Grandpa Zhang in private. There were 2 people in the Shadow Serene House that could not be offended. One was the owner, and the other was Mr. Zhang. To a certain extent, Elder Zhang was even more difficult to deal with than the owner of the Shadow Serene house. He had a high status, but no official position. However, the higher-ups of the Shadow Serene house treated him with respect. The owner would listen to Elder Zhang's opinions when making decisions. VIP. Wang Jinlong covered his face and stuttered for a long time. His legs were shaking involuntarily. Manager Wang, I brought Brotherly in. Are you saying that I'm a spy? Mr. Zhang asked again in an extremely cold tone. No, Mr. Zhang. It's a misunderstanding. It's all a misunderstanding. I was blind. Wang Jinlong panicked. He did not care that so many people were looking at him. From now on, you don't have to wear the clothes that represent the Shadow Serene house. Get out. Mr. Zhang waved his hand. Wang Jinlong sat on the ground with a thud. Old Devil Zhang shifted his gaze to Han Yahai, who shuddered. Did you attack Brotherly just now? Why did you order so many people to attack him? Old Devil Zhang's tone was calm, but this kind of tone made people shudder. Mr. Zhang, I just received an orange alert from Wang Jinlong. I thought that someone had invaded the Shadow Serene workshop, so I brought my brothers here to arrest them. I don't know anything else. Han Yahai insisted that it was all Wang Jinlong's fault and that it had nothing to do with him. He was just doing his job. Humph, Division Chief Hong. This old man brought Brotherly up to the 3rd floor. When we passed by the 2nd floor, we saw you chatting happily with an upper-class woman. Didn't you see me bring Brotherly upstairs? Old Ghost Zhang questioned. Hong Yahai was speechless, his expression extremely awkward. I'll deduct 3 months of your salary. You'll stand guard outside the tower. You'll be reinstated after 3 months, Elder Zhang said straightforwardly. Hong Yahai secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although the punishment was severe, at least his job was saved. As for the other guards, Old Man Zhang had them disperse on their own. He then greeted the 2 descendants of the Lin family and arranged for Tsang Jiao to continue receiving them. Throughout the entire process, Li Daochong was a little surprised. He had already thought highly of Old Devil Zhang, but it seemed that he had still underestimated him. Old Devil Zhang's position in the Shadow Serene Square was far beyond Li Daochong's estimation. This old man was obviously not as simple as he looked. Brotherly, I'm really sorry. I should have given you a diamond VIP card in advance. Old Devil Zhang said apologetically to Li Daochong after dealing with the whole matter. Old Devil Zhang's voice was not loud, but it was still heard by Tsang Jiao, who was about to leave with the 2 descendants of the Lin family. She looked at Li Daochong again with a pair of seductive eyes. She was extremely curious about this young man. What was the background of this young man? Why did Elder Zhang value him so much that he even wanted to give him a diamond VIP card personally? That was the highest level of VIP in the Shadow Serene Square. Tsang Jiao really wanted to get in touch with Li Daochong, but she had a task at hand, so she had to leave with the 2 descendants of the Lin family first. Old Devil Zhang once again brought Li Daochong into his crafting room. After entering, Li Daochong directly asked, Elder Zhang, how much does it cost to upgrade the Zamadeo? Old Devil Zhang chuckled. Brotherly, you helped me catch so many dark ghosts last time. This old man will upgrade this saber for free. After pausing for a moment, he went straight to the point. Brotherly, a zombie ghost was detected in an area outside the safety zone of the giant spirit space shuttle. I wonder if you're interested in coming with this old man to catch it? Li Daochong's expression changed slightly when he heard about the zombie ghost. It was one of the more powerful dark ghosts of the great ghost level. Its strength was equivalent to a cultivator in the middle stage of the Qi gathering. Zombie ghosts could release zombie poison that could turn corpses into zombies. They could also infect living people and slowly turn them into zombies. It was a very vicious type of dark ghost. A single zombie ghost had once destroyed an entire cultivation planet, turning the entire planet into a zombie purgatory. Zombie ghosts were one of the dark ghosts that the Federation was most wary of. They were not allowed to exist. Li Daochong's heart was moved. He wanted to increase his strength faster, and hunting high-level dark ghosts was the best way to do so. Li Daochong had no reason to refuse Old Devil Zhang's invitation. With someone helping him, the danger would be greatly reduced. Li Daochong pondered for a moment and asked, "When are we going?" Old Devil Zhang knew there was hope and hurriedly said, "How about half a month later? To be safe, this old man needs to refine a few artifacts that can restrain zombie ghosts and resist zombie poison." Li Daocheng's expression changed slightly. Half a month would not do. The new star competition was about to begin. He would not have time then. Old Devil Zhang, I have some matters to attend to in half a month. Can we change it to a month later? Old Devil Zhang thought for a moment and said, "All right, then a month later. Zombie ghosts are cunning by nature and can release zombie poison to control zombies. At that time, I'm afraid that just the two of us might not be enough. I'll have the owner of the Blue Bay Star branch of the Shadow Serene Square come with us." "Brotherly, do you have any objections?" Li Daochong shrugged. "I don't have any objections." When old Devil Zhang saw Li Daochong agree, he was overjoyed. He immediately took out a transparent spirit card and handed it to him. "Brotherly, this is the Shadow Serene Square's Diamond VIP card. With this card, you can enter and exit the Shadow Serene Square as you please. You can enjoy a 20% discount on any purchase. When you participate in the Shadow Serene Square's auctions, you will have priority to purchase at the same price." Li Daochong put away the transparent spirit card and said goodbye to old Devil Zhang. After exiting the Shadow Serene Tower, Li Daochong carefully made his way out of the underground city. In the next half a month, Li Daochong did not go to the Titanic Spirit Space Shuttle again. He had killed most of the dark ghosts in the safe zone. The remaining ones were not enough to fill the gaps between Li Daochong's teeth. Therefore, Li Daochong spent the remaining half a month in the old mansion's underground training room, consolidating his cultivation. He also bought 3 mid-level steel puppets to practice the 9-split saber technique. Bang, crack, dong. In the underground training room, Li Daochong was sweating profusely while fighting with a steel puppet at the early stage of the Qi gathering. Half a month later, 3 steel puppets attacked at the same time. Li Daochong could not withstand a single blow from them. Unknowingly, the Blue Bay Star's first Rising Star competition officially began in Xiansong University. On the first day of the competition, the weather was hot. The Xiansong University was even hotter. Tens of thousands of spectators had come to watch the competition. Everyone wanted to know who was the number one of the Blue Bay Star's younger generation. Was it Okikin, Gu Chao, or was it Orson, or was it Yi Fei Yue, or Duan Yao? As for Li Daochong, he had already been forgotten by everyone. Most people thought that he had died in the process of his travels. There were still 10 minutes before the competition officially began. Chapter 107. 3 circular arenas were placed in the school's largest square. Today was the preliminaries. Among more than 1,800 participating students, 200 would be selected to enter tomorrow's semifinals. In the first round, each student would draw lots to determine their opponent. Students with a cultivation level of Qi refinement level 10 and above would not participate in the first round. The number of students in this batch was extremely limited, with a total of more than 80 people. The rest of the students who won the first round would draw lots to fight against each other, and the losers would draw lots to fight against each other. Everything was arranged by the spiritual brain, and the drawing of lots was completed almost instantly. Those who won 5 matches would enter the semifinals. Those who lost 3 matches in a row or lost their combat ability would be eliminated. In terms of the rules of the duel, no killing, no poison, and no other restrictions. Techniques, magical weapons, talismans, magical powers, and even hidden weapons could be used at will. However, the preliminaries had a time limit of 3 minutes. If no winner was decided after 3 minutes, it would be considered a draw, and the loser would be included in the list of losers to draw lots. As the principal of the school hosting the first New Star competition, Yuan Longji naturally had to give a speech before the competition began. Then, the head of the Department of Education would give a speech, wishing the first New Star competition a success. Then came the drawing of lots. Behind the podium was a huge spiritual brains spiritual video screen, on which the names kept rolling. In just a few seconds, the list of all the participating students was arranged. The preliminaries would not be held in the arena. Every participating student only needed to enter the spiritual network through their wristwatches. The duel would be held in the spiritual network's great illusionary land, which would save time and allow everyone to duel at the same time. Among all the people Li Daocheng knew, more than half of them were not qualified to participate. Lu Feng, Ouyang Qian, Li Qingyao, Zhao Peng, Qiao Sinuo, and others were not in the 8th level of qi refinement. Yi Feiyue, Lu Ming, and Sidalon were among the few students Li Daocheng knew who could participate. There were still 10 minutes before the start of the competition. Both the participating students and the audience entered the spiritual network. The audience could choose to watch the contestants they were interested in. However, the preliminaries naturally did not attract much attention. The real experts were not in the first round. Only in the second round would they be arranged to enter the winner's list and draw lots. After entering the spiritual network, the participating students would be directly transmitted to the dual platforms. Nearly 900 dual platforms were all open to the public. For a moment, the great illusionary land on the spiritual net was extremely crowded. The entire Tianyuan city was focused on the first Rising Star competition. Although there were many spectators, there were so many matches in the first round of the qualifiers, so the crowd was still dispersed. The audience's attention was mainly focused on a few talented young cultivators. Although their cultivation hadn't reached the 10th layer of qi refining, their strength wasn't any weaker than a 10th layer qi refining cultivator. Tian Jin Tian, the number 1 member of the Tian family in Tianyuan City, Lin Yuhan and Lin Jiahao from the Lin family in Wanhai City, Lien Fugue from the Lien family, Wu Hai from the Wu family, and Qiu Yunfei from the Qiu family. These people all had the strength to challenge students in the 10th layer of qi refining. In addition, there were a few other second-year students who were also receiving a lot of attention. Among them, the most prominent were Chun Lin and Zhou Wenshan. Both of them were in the 9th layer of qi refining. Although their talent wasn't very high, they were second-year students after all. Whether it was in terms of cultivation methods or actual combat experience, they were much more experienced than the freshmen. Lien Fugue was a little fatty. He was in the 8th layer of qi refining and a member of the Green Wolf Society. He was fighting against Li Daocheng with Zhan Honglai on the ghost hunting planet. At this time, Lien Fugue was standing on the dual platform with a sinister smile on his face. All the students on the other dual platforms were ready, but there was no one in front of him. At first, Lien Fugue was a little confused. He thought his opponent was a careless person who hadn't entered the dual platform 5 minutes before the start of the competition. But when Lien Fugue saw his opponent's name clearly, he suddenly burst into laughter. His opponent was Li Daocheng. How could a dead man appear? He could win without a fight. Lien Fugue was beaming with joy. Lien Fugue himself was one of the stronger contestants. Therefore, the dual platform he was on had a lot of spectators. There were more than 1,000 people. There were also some people who saw Li Daocheng's name and entered the platform out of curiosity. After the news of Li Daocheng's death spread, it wasn't very convincing at first. But in the following days, no one saw Li Daocheng again. Gradually, people began to believe that Li Daocheng was dead. Otherwise, how could there be no trace of him after nearly 3 months? Early deaths of cultivators happened frequently. Unless everyone could be effectively protected later on, there was nothing strange about this kind of thing. Ouyang Qian sat in the audience with a gloomy expression. Even Li Qingyao didn't know where Li Daocheng was. It seemed that the rumors were most likely true. As the saying goes, there is no smoke without fire. Sister, why are you here? After entering the audience, Qiao Sinuo saw Qiao Shima sitting at the front. Her pretty face immediately showed a strange expression. I'm here to take a look. Qiao Shima's beautiful face was a little haggard. The Qiao family had fallen into crisis again in the past few months. Her disappointing father had caused trouble again. Li Daocheng's unexpected counterattack made Qiao Shima feel a little more complicated. She had never thought that this silly young master would become so powerful. After returning from the Ghost Hunter planet, Xiao Sinuo told Xiao Shima everything that had happened. She thought that her sister would be happy. Unexpectedly, Xiao Shima listened indifferently and said that they were divorced. Xiao Sinuo looked at her sister in shock and was speechless. She recalled her behavior of calling Li Daochong brother-in-law. It was ridiculous. Sister, Li Daochong won't appear. I've asked his sister Li Qingyao. He hasn't sent back any news since he left home to travel, Xiao Sinuo said with a sigh. Yes, I know. Xiao Shima nodded slightly, a trace of sadness flashing through her beautiful eyes. Recalling Li Daochong's various actions in the past, she suddenly felt a little sorry for him. Lin Fugue, that brat, actually drew a dead man. His luck is pretty good. I wonder who signed up Li Daochong. Laughter came from the seats next to them. Shoo, lower your voice. I heard that the one who signed up Li Daochong was Qian Changhai, the vice dean of the Cultivation Academy. He thinks very highly of Li Daochong. Another audience member pointed at the back of a thin and weak old man standing at the front. Qian Changhai kept looking at the time. There were only 3 minutes left until the duel began. If a contestant didn't show up, they would be disqualified. Qian Changhai didn't believe the news that Li Daochong was dead. He had already signed up Li Daochong, but until now, Li Daochong still hadn't appeared. The old man's heart began to waver. Chapter 108. Young Master Zhan, Li Daochong still hasn't shown up. He must have been killed by the assassins. Haha, congratulations on removing the thorn in your heart. Xiao Shima is now a widow. Chun Puhua's expression was as treacherous as it could get. As Zhan Honglia's lackey, Chun Puhua was qualified. With his father's full support, Zhan Honglai had endured hellish training for 3 months, soaking in the qi-gathering liquid at night. Now that he had successfully broken through to the 11th level of the qi refining stage, he was only 1 step away from the qi gathering stage. Both his strength and cultivation had greatly increased. Zhan Honglai had a bye in the first round, so he hadn't entered the spiritual nexus. Instead, he had waited outside for the next round to begin. However, Chun Puhua had sent him a message, saying that Li Daochong's name was on the list for the preliminaries. Li Daochong's opponent was one of their bad friends, little fatty Lin Fugue. It wasn't strange that Li Daochong's name was in the preliminaries. The Zhan family had already received the news that the old man, Qian Changhai, had registered Li Daochong as soon as possible. Li Daochong was first in the beta test, so he naturally met the requirements to participate in the beta test. In addition, Qian Changhai had used his position to say that Li Daochong was his personal disciple. Naturally, Li Daochong didn't need to show up to easily register his name. However, Zhan Honglai still wanted to see with his own eyes whether Li Daochong would appear. Although the probability was 0, he still wanted to see it with his own eyes. In addition, Chun Puhua had also told Zhan Honglai that Xiao Shima had also come. This woman that Zhan Honglai had yearned for day and night had almost disappeared in recent months. The Qiao family's business had suffered a setback, and Xiao Shima's father had become addicted to gambling and owed a huge debt. Zhan Honglai had added fuel to the fire behind the scenes. His goal was to push Xiao Shima into a corner. Zhan Honglai was well aware of Xiao Shima's character. She was unmoved by force or persuasion. She would never fall into his arms just by throwing money at her. First, he would make her a widow. Then, he would destroy the Qiao family. Xiao Shima would have no one to rely on. The only person she could think of would be Zhan Honglai. Zhan Honglia's wishful thinking had long been in place. At this moment, he was standing at the back of the audience and looking at Xiao Shima in the front row. Zhan Honglia's face revealed a proud smile. Soon, the beauty he yearned for day and night would fall into his arms. How can trash like Li Daochong be compared to young Master Zhan? That brat was destined to be a dead piece of trash with no future since the day he was born. Another rich young master beside, Chun Puhua, said disdainfully, "You guys are the trash." As the rich young masters laughed and cursed, Lu Feng, who was sitting in the back row, cursed angrily. He couldn't bear to listen any longer. As a good friend, Lu Feng didn't want to believe the news of Li Daochong's death. However, he couldn't find Li Daochong several times. Li Qingyao also didn't know of Li Daocheng's whereabouts. Today, when he saw Li Daocheng's name appear on the preliminary list, Lu Feng came to watch with a trace of hope. How he wished that his good friend could appear on the battle platform. He also thought that one day he could serve in the military with Li Daocheng and fight on the front lines. They could drive those damned nether ghosts back to the Hades and protect their country. But now all of this was just a dream. Lu Feng, are you King itching for a beating? Hurry up and come over here and kowtow. I'll pretend you didn't hear anything, the rich young master beside, Chen Puhua said harshly. The students sitting next to Lu Feng saw that the situation wasn't right. They all got up and left, afraid that they would get into trouble. All of a sudden, there was no one between Lu Feng and the rich young master, leaving only 2 empty chairs. Although they were in the great illusionary land of the spiritual nexus, if they made a move, it would still cause harm to the main body. The spirit body in the great illusionary land was connected to the main body. Lu Feng cultivated desperately for a year and was only at the 4th level of qi refinement. On the other hand, the rich young master usually ate, drank, and played. With the strong support of his family's resources, he was already at the peak of the 6th level of qi refinement. He was only a step away from the 7th level of qi refinement. Kowtow your mother. Lu Feng's eyes were bloodshot. The cursing between the 2 sides quickly alarmed the entire stands. Many students turned their heads to look. Lu Ming and Sida Lan, who were sitting on the other side, also saw this scene. Who was that guy? How did he provoke young Master Zhan and his gang? Sida Lan was slightly puzzled. When the students in the school saw young Master Zhan and his gang, they all avoided them. That kid is one of Li Daocheng's few good friends. His name is Lu Feng. His family is poor. Last year, Li Daocheng gave him a lot of his resources, so the 2 of them have a good relationship. Lu Ming yawned and said, Lu Ming, you seem to be very concerned about Li Daocheng's matters. You even investigated his friends? Sida Lan turned her face and said with a trace of surprise in her eyes, when it comes to friends worth making, this young master should at least try to understand them. Unfortunately, it's useless now. That kid Li Daocheng's life isn't tough enough. There's nothing we can do about it. Lu Ming said with a look of pity. Lu Ming and Sida Lan were both at the 10th level of qi refinement. They had no one in the first round and should have been waiting for the second round to begin. However, after seeing Li Daocheng's name, the 2 of them still decided to come and take a look. Damn trash, you're courting death. How could the rich young master stand Lu Feng's rude words in front of everyone? He immediately flew into a rage. He suddenly stood up and rushed towards Lu Feng. He grabbed his collar and slapped him twice. Lu Feng suddenly saw stars, and his mind became unstable. His body even trembled. At this time, Qian Changhai, who was standing at the front of the audience, also heard the commotion. He turned his head and looked. As the school's vice principal, he should have stepped forward to stop a conflict between students. However, Qian Changhai's turbid eyes did not have a trace of light. After a glance, he turned his head and looked towards the battle platform. Qian Changhai's expression was lonely and his heart was empty. At this time, even the beauty in his eyes had become dim. A student that he had high hopes for had disappeared just like that. If he was alive, he could not find his body. If he was dead, he could not find his body. How could he not be heartbroken? Qian Shanghai had a unique eye for people. As he observed Li Daocheng and Chu Qinyue's special training, he liked this kid more and more. In his opinion, Li Daocheng's future achievements would be even greater than Battle Sword Augustine's. More importantly, Li Daocheng would be just like Chu Qinyue, a sharp blade for the Federation to destroy Dark Ghost. But now that this sharp blade was gone, Qian Shanghai felt as if he had lost something very important in his life. Principal Qian, there's a fight in the back. A student recognized Qian Shanghai and ran over to shout. Qian Shanghai acted as if he did not hear. He only looked at the empty spot across from Lin Fugue on the battle platform. Being ignored, the student was embarrassed. He was about to turn and leave when Qian Shanghai suddenly turned his head and looked at him, his eyes shining. The student was given a fright. His face paled as he felt a wave of pressure assault him. He quickly retreated several steps and looked at Qian Changhai in fear. Then, a strange smile appeared on Qian Changhai's wrinkled face. Had the vice principal gone crazy? The student's legs went soft. Ha ha! Qian Changhai raised his head and laughed. The student ran away with snot running down his nose. The surrounding students looked at Qian Changhai in fear. What was this usually frivolous vice principal laughing about? In the back of the audience, Lu Feng, who had been slapped twice by the rich young master, was so enraged that even a rabbit would bite. Lu Feng bit down on the rich young master's hand. "Ah, damn dog, die!" The rich young master screamed and punched Lu Feng's temple. Lu Feng's spiritual body would definitely be seriously injured by this punch, and his main body would also be affected. Ah! Many girls cried out in fear, not daring to look. The boys were all pale, feeling injustice for Lu Feng, but they did not dare to say anything. Bang! A muffled sound. The rich young master's body flew back like a broken kite, flying several dozen meters before landing at Lian Fugue's feet. Chapter 109. The audience was completely silent. Everyone's expression was different, but they were all shocked and stunned. Xiao Shima's dull face seemed to have a little color at this time, and her small mouth was wide open. Xiao Shima covered her mouth and looked at the familiar figure in disbelief. Lu Ming stood up from his seat, and Sitolan's beautiful eyes were wide open. Lu Feng looked at Li Daocheng, who suddenly appeared, and thought it was fake. He rubbed his eyes, but he still didn't believe it and reached out to touch Li Daocheng. "I'm not gay." Li Daocheng took a step back. "Daocheng, it's really you." Lu Feng felt like he was going to cry. "Nonsense. It's the real deal," Li Daocheng replied in a bad mood. "You're not dead." Lu Feng continued to ask. "Ba ba ba. What do you mean by dead?" "Okay, I'll stop talking to you. The battle is about to start. If I don't appear on the battle platform, I'll be disqualified," Li Daocheng said with a look of disgust. After saying that, Li Daocheng's figure flashed and flew into the air, landing on the battle platform from the audience. There were still 10 seconds before the battle began. Lian Fugue's neck stretched out like a crow, and his two small eyes turned into two small dots, staring blankly at Li Daocheng, who landed on the battle platform at the last moment. The Lian family was also involved in the plan to deal with Li Daocheng, so Lian Fugue naturally knew that more than a dozen families had joined together to secretly hire assassins to kill Li Daocheng. He heard that the hired assassins had qi gathering cultivation, and killing Li Daocheng, who was in the qi refinement stage, was still not a certainty. Lian Fugue felt the comfort of ice and fire in a few minutes. He thought he could win without a fight, but he didn't expect Li Daocheng to come back from the dead and appear at the last moment. Lian Fugue had seen with his own eyes how Li Daocheng had beaten Zhan Honglai into a dead dog on the ghost hunting planet. Young Master Zhan, who was awesome in his heart, was completely powerless in front of Li Daocheng. Even though Li Daocheng's strength had not increased during this period of time and was still at the same level as during the beta test, even Fugue was no match for him. In the audience, Zhan Honglia's heart was in turmoil. He looked at Li Daocheng in shock and anger. This brat didn't die. How could this be? Zhan Honglai gritted his teeth as the aura in his body surged. When he looked at Xiao Shima and saw the joy on her delicate and beautiful face, he was about to explode from anger. Zhan Honglia's body trembled uncontrollably. This thorn in his side was harder to remove than he had imagined. Even the assassin couldn't kill Li Daocheng. Zhan Honglai suddenly realized that this idiot, whom he had once looked down on and regarded as an ant, was growing at an astonishing speed. Don't underestimate anyone, especially your enemy. Even a mosquito can take the life of an elephant. This sentence, which his father often said to Zhan Honglai, was now echoing in Zhan Honglia's ears. Zhan Honglia's trembling body gradually calmed down. He clenched his fists tightly, and the anger in his eyes slowly dissipated, replaced by a rare seriousness. Li Daocheng, fortunately you didn't die. Now I have the chance to end you with my own hands. You'd better pray that I'm not your opponent in the draw. If I am, I will completely destroy you in front of the entire Tianyuan city. Zhang Honglui's lips curled into a bloody smile. His eyes finally fell on Qiao Shima in the front row, and then his figure flashed out of the great illusionary land. Zhang Honglai had left, but Chen Puhua was still in a daze. He stood behind the audience as if he had entered a trance. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. On the battle platform, you, are you a human or a ghost? Lien Fugue was incoherent. Just as he finished speaking, beep, a clear sound. Planet Indigo Bay, the first Rising Star competition begins now. Students, for a better future as a cultivator, let's fight. An inspiring yet gentle female voice rang out on all the battle platforms. Immediately, all the battle platforms supported a virtual protective net to prevent the aftermath of the battle from affecting the audience. After Lien Fugue asked this question, Li Daochong acted as if he didn't hear it and slowly walked toward Lien Fugue. Li Daochong's aura was very peaceful. There was almost no release, and no strong aura could be felt. However, Lien Fugue felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious beast. He trembled and couldn't move. The scene of Li Daochong beating Zhang Honglai was still vivid in his mind. Lien Fugue felt scared just thinking about it. Don't come over, Lien Fugue said in horror. Hearing this, the audience roared with laughter. Who would say something like this on the battle platform? Li Daochong walked in front of Lien Fugue and looked at him with an expressionless face. Lien Fugue felt his hair stand on end. Suddenly, Li Daochong laughed. Duh. Lien Fugue took 2 steps back and sat on the ground with a thump. He didn't know why, but seeing Li Daochong laugh made his hair stand on end. Li Daochong didn't chase after Lien Fugue. He picked up the rich young master who was still lying on the stage and threw him. The rich young master was thrown high into the air like a ball of paper. As he landed, Li Daochong waved his hand. Pong! The already unconscious Kwa Xiao suffered another heavy blow and was sent flying backwards. With a boom, he crashed into the protective net of the battle platform, bouncing back and crashing onto the platform. The rich young master's spirit body showed signs of collapsing and disappeared in a short while. He directly left the spiritual net. The rich young master's body spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground with a thump. The attendant beside him was shocked. Lien Fugue awkwardly got up and retreated more than 10 steps to keep a safe distance from Li Daochong. His fat face showed a trace of ruthlessness, and a broad axe appeared in his hand. There was a layer of faint flames burning on it. This was a human tier mid-grade flame axe. In his other hand, there was a blue talisman. It was a level 3 thunder talisman with a very strong attack power. Lien Fugue didn't dare to get close to Li Daochong. Even if he had a trump card, he didn't think he could defeat Li Daochong for sure. But the little fatty felt that as long as he put some distance between them, he could use his family's footwork to attack Li Daochong from time to time. As long as he didn't collapse, he should be able to drag it out for 3 minutes. In any case, he was now at the peak of the 8th level of Qi refining. Lien Fugue is getting serious. He even took out his flame axe. No matter how strong Li Daochong is, it won't be that easy to defeat him, a student in the audience said. Li Daochong is unarmed. His bare hands may not be a match for Lien Fugue. The damn fatty still has brute strength. The Lien family's mountain-splitting axe art is a human-tier high-grade technique. It can't be underestimated, another student said. At the same time, on the battle platform, after Li Daochong eliminated the eyesore, he didn't move. He just looked at Lien Fugue indifferently. With a flame axe in his hand, Lien Fugue had some confidence. With an axe in hand, I have the courage. Li Daochong, don't think you're so great. Come, believe it or not, I'll beat you. Lien Fugue raised his flame axe and shouted. But his words stopped abruptly. Lien Fugue's small eyes were turbid. Clang! The flame axe in his hand fell to the ground for some reason. Li Daochong turned around and walked down the platform. What is Li Daochong doing? Is he giving up? Someone in the audience said in surprise. Chapter 110. Li Daocheng's action of turning around and stepping down from the stage caused an uproar in the audience. They didn't know why Li Daocheng did that. Li Daocheng had only taken a few steps when the protective net of the platform was automatically removed. Thud! Lien Fugui's fat body stiffened and fell to the ground. Li Daocheng wins. The announcement sounded. The audience was once again in an uproar. They were all baffled and had no idea what had just happened. Only Qian Changhai, who was standing in the audience, had a smile on his old face. Everything was within his expectations, but there was still a hint of surprise in his eyes. Even I can't see through this kid's telekinesis attack, Qian Changhai thought to himself. Li Daocheng walked down the platform without looking back. What happened? Someone in the audience asked in surprise. Did you see Li Daocheng's move? I didn't see it. Could it be that Lien Fugui had a stroke? I heard that this kid is sucking immortal herbs. Everyone in the audience was baffled. They had no idea what had just happened. Even the powerful Sidalon and Lu Ming had no idea how Li Daocheng had defeated Lien Fugui. For a moment, everyone looked at Li Daocheng with confusion. As Li Daocheng's good friend, Lu Feng, was in a daze. During the end-of-term testing, Li Daocheng was already very strong. Now, he seemed to be even stronger. Xiao Shima's beautiful eyes flickered. At this moment, Li Daocheng was becoming more and more unpredictable in her eyes. Xiao Shima felt that she had become a fool. Her prejudices and opinions about Li Daocheng in the past were just a joke. Xiao Shima was the first to react. He rushed down the platform from the audience and ran toward Li Daocheng. Brother-in-law. No, Li Daocheng. How did you defeat Lien Fugui just now? Why didn't I see you do anything? Xiao Shima asked with a strange expression. Li Daocheng smiled and said, I used a hidden weapon. Xiao Sinuo blinked in disbelief, but seeing that Li Daocheng didn't seem to want to talk about it, he stopped asking. At this time, Lu Feng also walked over with a strange look in his eyes. Li Daocheng's changes in the past few months were too shocking. A few months ago, Li Daocheng was ranked last in the whole school, while Lu Feng was considered to be in the middle of the ordinary class. At that time, Lu Feng, as his good friend, didn't look down on Li Daocheng. He was just anxious for his good friend and hoped that he could also awaken his spirit vein. But today, a few months later, not only had Li Daocheng awakened his spiritual meridians, but he had also defeated an expert in the 8th level of qi refining without even moving. As a good friend, Lu Feng was happy for Li Daocheng, but he also felt a sense of distance in his heart. Lu Feng knew that the gap between him and Li Daocheng was far greater than the gap between him and himself. Daocheng, congratulations on your victory. Lu Feng congratulated with a bit of shyness. Feng Zi, you have to work hard. If you have any difficulties in your cultivation, you can tell me. Li Daocheng patted Lu Feng's shoulder. In the corner of the auditorium sat a spectator wearing a robe. His head was covered by a hood, and his face was hidden in the large robe, making it impossible to see his appearance clearly. Even his gender was unclear. Under the robe hid a delicate and curvaceous body. It was a woman. If Li Daocheng saw her, he would be shocked. She was Li Daocheng, who had met him half a month ago in the underground city, Zheng Jiao. This guy is amazing. No wonder Mr. Zhang thinks so highly of him. He defeated an opponent in the 8th level of qi refining without even making a move. Even a cultivator in the qi gathering stage might not be able to do that, Zheng Jiao muttered to herself. After parting with Li Daocheng last time, Zheng Jiao learned some information about Li Daocheng from Mr. Zhang. Zheng Jiao was very curious about Li Daocheng and wanted to know who this young man was. Zheng Jiao, who had a keen sense of professionalism, felt that her rapid promotion in the Shadow Serene Square could be greatly helped if she had a good relationship with this young man. Zheng Jiao was a very powerful spiritual net hacker. This was her secret. Other than her master, no one else knew about this secret. Zheng Jiao could easily infiltrate the back end of the spiritual net of some medium-sized cultivation companies and obtain valuable information. Of course, this was against the Federation's cultivation law. If there was no special need, Zheng Jiao would not do it. This time, in order to investigate Li Daocheng, Zheng Jiao could be said to have used all her skills. But in the end, she found that this person did not seem to exist. Xing Jiao had to investigate from another angle. She collected information about a group of young talents in the Blue Bay Star and analyzed it. In the end, there was no result. Xing Jiao did not give up and checked some of the major events that had happened in the Blue Bay Star in the past few months. Heaven did not disappoint those who worked hard. Although Xing Jiao still did not find any accurate information about this young man's identity, through her woman's intuition, Xing Jiao finally locked onto the first place of Xiansong University's end-of-term test, Li Daochong. However, when Xing Jiao combined all the information she could find about this young man, Li Daochong, she found that he was very likely dead. However, Xing Jiao did not give up because of this. In the information she investigated, Li Daochong's name appeared in the Rising Star competition. With the mentality of giving a try, Xing Jiao went to the competition venue to watch. The match she chose was naturally Li Daochong's match. When Li Daochong appeared, Xing Jiao almost screamed. She had guessed correctly. Li Daochong was the young man who had been brought to the Serene house by old Zhang half a month ago. Seeing how powerful Li Daochong was, Xing Jiao's desire to get close to this young man became even stronger. If she wanted to be promoted in the future, she would have to rely on him. Xing Jiao thought to herself. The news that Li Daochong did not die and appeared on the preliminaries battle platform quickly spread. The video of his battle with Lian Fugue was also spread. For a time, Tianyuan City was in an uproar. Many people began to analyze how Li Daochong defeated Lian Fugue. There were different opinions. There was an uproar under that video. Some people said that Li Daochong used a secret technique, a kind of invisible attack, such as Shadowless Hand, Ghost Claw, Qi Condensed Finger, Fighting Spirit, and so on. Some people said that Lian Fugue was too angry and was affected by Li Daochong's psychological pressure, which caused the spirit energy in his body to become chaotic and faint. Some people also said that Li Daochong caught a dead mouse by chance. Lian Fugue had already gone mad and would faint once he was agitated. However, a very small number of people believed that Li Daochong had used some kind of hidden weapon on Lian Fugue. In short, there were thousands of analysis posts in 10 minutes. As the person involved, Li Daochong had already logged out of the spiritual nexus and was waiting for the second round to begin. Many students logged out of the spiritual nexus to see Li Daochong himself. However, they did not find any trace of Li Daochong near the 3 standard arenas. At this time, Li Daochong was sitting quietly in the Despair training room. This place was of great significance to him. It was the place where his strength really began to soar. Li Daochong hoped that Chu Qianyue could see his performance in the competition with her own eyes. Unfortunately, he did not know where his teacher was now. The first round was soon over. After the spiritual brain drew lots, the second round was about to begin. Li Daochong received the message and logged into the spiritual nexus again. He was directly transmitted to the battle platform. This time, there were no empty seats in the auditorium. There were at least tens of thousands of people present. The battle platform, where Li Daochong appeared, became the most popular viewing platform of the second round. The Grand Illusionary Land Company immediately broadcasted this match worldwide. Chapter 111. At the start of the second round, those students who were in the 10th level of Qi refining and above who didn't get a bye in the first round would also have to fight. Gu Chao, Ao Kachuan, Orson, Duan Yao, and Yi Feiyue's matches were very popular. The audience was packed with people. Apart from them, Lu Ming, Li Tianyao, Zhan Honglai, and Sidalan's matches were also very popular. However, the most popular match of the second round was still Li Daochong's match. The audience didn't think that Li Daochong was very strong, but rather, they wanted to see what kind of concealed weapon he was using. Under the video of the first round, a lot of people made bets. They bet on what kind of concealed weapon or technique Li Daochong was using. Someone bet 100,000 Federation coins that Li Daochong was using the Dense Fog Company's shadow darts. This kind of concealed weapon was made from a very special magic treasure material. It was silent and had an invisibility effect. Zhou Wenshan was much stronger than Lien Fugue. His cultivation was at the peak of the 9th level of qi refining, and he was very experienced in fighting. He was proficient in close combat and concealed weapons. On the battle platform, Li Daochong stood with his eyes closed with an indifferent expression. This action made Zhou Wenshan very angry. This guy was actually closing his eyes in front of him. This was clearly looking down on him. However, although Zhou Wenshan was angry, he didn't lose his cool. He already knew that Li Daochong was using concealed weapons. Zhou Wenshan himself was proficient in concealed weapons. It just so happened that he also had the Dense Fog Company Shadow Darts. This kind of invisible concealed weapon that cost 50,000 Federation coins was a must-have for traveling. Shadow darts had many shortcomings compared to talismans. For example, the power of the darts was not fixed. Instead, it was determined by the strength of the person who cast it. A powerful person could easily cut off a mountain with a single dart, while a weak person might not even be able to pierce through a piece of wood. However, shadow darts also had many advantages. For example, they were silent and could kill people without being seen. Zhou Wenshan was an expert in concealed weapons. He was proficient in both releasing and blocking concealed weapons. You dare to look down on me? I'll make you cry later. Li Daochong, don't think that you're so awesome just because you got first place in the exam. I'll let you know that you have to pay the price for underestimating your opponent. Just close your eyes. Zhou Wenshan coldly looked at Li Daochong, who was 10 meters away from him, and thought. At this time, in addition to the students, there were all kinds of people in the audience. Zhang Jintian sat in an inconspicuous position with a gloomy face. When he found out that Li was Li Daochong's death, he knocked out the family servant who came to report. The cost of hiring an assassin was so high that even the Zhang family felt the pinch. The assassin accepted the money, but he was still alive. Zhang Jintian immediately sent a message to the Dark Knight contact. The other party replied that they would investigate. These 3 words sent Jintian away. How could Jintian not feel heartache when he lost 5 million Federation coins? More importantly, Li Daochong appeared on the battle platform alive and kicking, and even became famous in one battle. The more famous Li Daochong was, the greater the price to pay to deal with him. Jintian regretted that he was too cautious. He should have personally gone to Li Daochong's residence to investigate. It was too late to regret now. Looking at Li Daochong, standing on the battle platform with his eyes closed, Jintian's nostrils were spewing fire. The young face that looked similar to Li Tianyang was not pleasing to the eye. Of course, it was not only Zhang Jintian who was distressed, but also Li Tianxing and the senior members of the Li family. For the past 3 months, they had thought that Li Daochong was dead, and Li Tianyang was about to die. They had sent many people to the old house, but there was no trace of the father and son. They had even used some magic tools, but there was still no result. Only Li Qingyao and the maid, Kanu, lived in the old mansion. However, after Li Daochong's appearance, the Li family's higher-ups, who had finally relaxed for the past few days, once again felt their hearts in their throats. Li Daochong was safe and sound, but where had Li Tianyang gone? As long as this all-powerful boss was alive, he was a threat to the higher-ups who controlled the Li family. In fact, the Li family's affairs had not been going well for the past 6 months. Many members of the Li family had voiced their opinion that the current head of the family was not as capable as Li Tianyang. The family was walking down the altar, and they hoped that Li Tianyang could come back and continue to lead the family. Such voices were extremely bad for the Li family's higher-ups. The 3 elders, the head of the family, and the head of the family had not been having a good time recently. The brothers Li Qianxing and Li Tianhe had lived under the shadow of Li Tianyang since they were young. They had been firmly suppressed by Li Tianyang. Although the 3 elders were seniors, ever since Li Tianyang became the head of the family, he had not put them in his eyes at all. Not only did he not give them any face, but he also infinitely reduced their authority to the point that they existed in name only. Only after Li Tianyang's accident did they truly feel the prestige and power of an elder. This long-awaited feeling was very good. However, as long as Li Tianyang was still alive, their hearts would not be at ease. After Li Daocheng's strong victory in the first round, the Li family and the Zhan family quickly contacted each other. They bribed the two lecturers, Lian Bin and Tian Bo, and had them tamper with the lots. Zhou Wenshan becoming Li Daocheng's opponent was not randomly drawn by the spiritual brain. It was specially arranged. Li Tianhe even used his status as the head of the Li family to find Yuan Longji and promised him many benefits. The condition was that he would turn a blind eye to the lot drawing. Yuan Longji was naturally happy to do this kind of thing that had no risk and could bring him benefits. Moreover, Li Daocheng was originally a member of the Li family. If they wanted to clean up the family, that was their family's internal matter. Li Daocheng was not promoted by Yuan Longji. No matter how good his results were, it was all Qian Changhai and Chu Qianyue's credit. It had nothing to do with him at all. Li Daocheng, who was standing on a battle platform, naturally didn't know about the secret manipulation. However, even if Li Daocheng knew that his opponent was specially arranged, it probably didn't matter. Because with Li Daocheng's current strength, it didn't matter who his opponent was at all. Any tricks were meaningless when faced with absolute strength. Therefore, it didn't matter whether Li Daocheng knew or not. 3 minutes later, that very official female voice sounded. The second round of the battle began. Zhou Wenshan thought that Li Daocheng would open his eyes after the announcement, but who would have thought that Li Daocheng didn't have any intention of opening his eyes after the announcement? The spectators in the audience were also confused by Li Daocheng's action of closing his eyes. Could it be that this kid was going to fight Zhou Wenshan with his eyes closed? Wasn't this too arrogant? Even if Li Daocheng instantly killed Lian Fuguwei, Zhou Wenshan was an opponent on another level. Not only was his cultivation base one level higher, but he was also proficient in hidden weapons. How could he dodge a hidden weapon with his eyes closed? Zhou Wenshan sneered in his heart. With a flick of his hand, an invisible wave shot out. Li Daocheng didn't close his eyes to show off, nor did he look down on Zhou Wenshan. He was just using his telekinesis to perceive everything in the outside world. Li Daocheng didn't want to miss the opportunity to practice through actual combat. As soon as the prompt sounded, Li Daocheng immediately felt a strange fluctuation. He tilted his head slightly and heard the sound of something flying through the air. Something brushed past his ear and flew past. Could he dodge the shadow darts with his eyes closed? Chapter 112. Just like the battle with Lian Fuguwei, Li Daocheng turned around and left the stage without warning. The only difference was that Li Daocheng's eyes were still closed. With a thud, Zhou Wenshan fell to the ground. Li Daocheng wins. The prompt announced. The protective net disappeared. The duel ended inexplicably in front of everyone. Still, no one saw how Li Daocheng attacked. But this time, there were not only a group of new students in the audience, there were also many fans of the Great Illusionary Lands Arena and some experts who had reached the Qi gathering stage. The Rising Star Tournament's qualifiers were carried out using the Great Illusionary Lands Arena, so it naturally attracted a lot of fans. Li Daocheng used mysterious means to defeat his opponent in both battles. So many people thought that Li Daocheng must often enter the Great Illusionary Lands Arena to fight. His record was probably not bad. But when these fans checked Li Daocheng's ID information, they were all stunned. Li Daocheng had no record of his past record. Not only that, Li Daocheng's ID was blank, except for his name, there was nothing else. In other words, he had never shown his face in the Great Illusionary Lands Arena. Li Daocheng's battle with Lian Fuguwei was his first battle in the Great Illusionary Land. At present, Li Daocheng's information showed that he had 2 wins and 0 losses and nothing else. Unique skills, cultivation methods, winning percentage, they were all blank. Without more than 10 battles, the Great Illusionary Land would not give out analysis data. Li Daocheng's attack method was still a mystery. But there were still some experts who saw the clues, and finally someone posted an analysis explaining how Li Daocheng attacked. Telekinesis attack. This word finally entered the public's eyes. Brother Zhan, my nephew, is actually a telekinesis cultivator. No wonder he's so mysterious. It seems that Zhou Wenshan's level is not enough. Li Tianqing stood beside Zhang Jintian and said with a worried face, Deacon Li, who do you want to be your nephew's next opponent? Zhang Jintian narrowed his eyes and asked, Brother Zhang, I heard that Yi Feiyue once traveled together with Li Daochong on a ghost hunting planet. The two of them seem to have an unusual relationship. This lass of the Yi family is exceptionally talented, and her strength is close to Li Daochong's. I think she's pretty good, Li Tianqing replied indifferently. Administrator Li, you have a good eye? Then arrange for Yi Feiyue to become Li Daochong's next opponent, Zhang Jintian said with a smile. Brother Zhang, let's forget about the preliminaries. If it's too obvious, it will be noticed. My nephew currently has no problem entering the semifinals, unless we arrange for Orson and Gu Chao as his next three opponents. However, the House of Oku and the Gu family are not stupid. If they get involved, it will be very troublesome. Let's let the spirit brain decide on the next three opponents. Li Tianqing looked cautious. Administrator Li is farsighted, but this Zhang is a little anxious. Then, according to Administrator Li, let's arrange Li Daochong's next three opponents randomly, Zhang Jintian said with a smile. Okay. Li Tianqing nodded and then turned around to leave. There was a sneaky look on his face, as if he was afraid that others would see him together with Zhang Jintian. This detail made Zhang Jintian very uncomfortable. At the same time, a trace of vigilance rose in his heart. In the eyes of the Li family, the Zhang family was nothing more than a hidden chess piece used to deal with Li Tianyang and his son. Once they were useless, they would be abandoned at any time. The current Li family was no longer the Li family of the past. Although Zhang Jintian hated Li Tianyang, if Li Tianyang cooperated with him, he would absolutely not have any other thoughts. Li Tianyang was a man of his word, but Li Tianqing and Li Tianhe were different. These two guys weren't strong, but they were very sinister and cunning. How could a person who could even betray his own family have any morals to speak of? However, the Li family wasn't something that the Zhang family could afford to offend. Not to mention the three elders and the head of the family, Li Tianhe. Just Li Tianqing was something that Zhang Jintian couldn't deal with. Even if the Li family didn't have Li Tianyang, it was still a starving camel that was bigger than a horse. They were different from other families, having at least 10 foundation establishment stage cultivators. The Zhang family only had one, and he was a survivor of the older generation. Zhang Jintian was only at the peak of the Qi gathering stage, and had yet to break through to the foundation establishment stage. The consequences of falling out with the Li family would be very serious. It was possible that the Zhang family would be wiped out. The Li family could casually move a finger, and the Zhang family would be consigned to eternal damnation. Zhang Jintian was sitting on pins and needles, unable to dismount from a tiger. Although Zhang Jintian looked relaxed, his heart was in turmoil. If Li Daochong was a mental cultivator, it would be even more troublesome. The Federation attached great importance to mental cultivators because they were more adept at dealing with dark ghosts than cultivators. Dark ghosts' hallucinations and charms were greatly reduced against mental cultivators. Mental cultivators could also see through the dark ghost formation set up by dark ghosts, and mental cultivators had an innate advantage in controlling spirit brains. A spirit sequencer wasn't necessarily a mental cultivator, but a mental cultivator was definitely a spirit sequencer. Li Daochong's growth was already out of control, and Zhang Jintian had a bad feeling. Just being a mental cultivator was enough to make him a meteoric rise. Just as Zhang Jintian was vexed, an old man slowly walked over. When Zhang Jintian saw the old man, he immediately became vigilant and put away his distracting thoughts, putting on a nonchalant expression. The newcomer was none other than Xiao Xiong, who had gone to cause trouble for Li Tianyang as soon as Li Tianyang returned. 20 years ago, Xiao Xiong and Li Tianyang had formed a grudge over a sea mine. At that time, Li Tianyang had just entered Foundation Establishment, and Xiao Xiong was a veteran Foundation Establishment cultivator. Naturally, Xiao Xiong didn't care about Li Tianyang, who had just entered Foundation Establishment. At that time, The Chiu family was also a large family. In order to fight for the sea mine, Li Tianyong single-handedly occupied 3 islands near the mine. Chiu Xiong was furious and clashed with Li Tianyong. In that battle, Li Tianyong had single-handedly defeated 3 of the Chiu clan's top experts, including Chiu Xiong. The other 2 were heavily injured and left with hidden injuries, unable to recover from that setback. Chiu Xiong was also injured, but his foundation was not damaged. Li Tianyong then dealt a heavy blow to the Chiu family's business. Since then, the Chiu family began to decline rapidly. 2 years later, no one knew about the Chiu family of Blue Bay Star. It could be said that Li Tianyong was the main culprit behind the destruction of the Chiu family. Chiu Xiong wanted to destroy the Chiu family several times, but he didn't succeed. Li Tianyong's strength grew too fast. In the end, Chiu Xiong had no choice but to rely on the Ghoul family and become a steward of the Ghoul family. Chiu Xiong relied on the Ghoul family to avoid Li Tianyong's revenge and wait for an opportunity to take revenge. However, Li Tianyong's talent was far beyond his imagination. After a few years, he entered the Jin Dan stage and became the king of Blue Bay Star. Seeing that the Ghoul family wasn't so safe, Chiu Xiong had no choice but to temporarily put down his hatred and avoid the brunt of the attack. It wasn't until Li Tianyong was exposed that Chiu Xiong saw the hope of revenge. However, when facing Li Tianyong, Chiu Xiong still had a lingering fear and didn't dare to directly clash with Li Tianyong. However, Chiu Xiong had been monitoring Li Tianyong ever since he returned and accidentally found information about the Zhan family's assassins. "You're Zhan Jintian?" Chiu Xiong asked as soon as he came up. Zhan Jintian's heart slightly skipped a beat. He felt the powerful fluctuations coming from the old man, and his eyes revealed a hint of fear. Even though Zhan Jintian was the head of the family, he had no choice but to lower his arrogant head in front of a Foundation Establishment stage cultivator. "Junior has poor eyesight. May I know who Senior is?" Zhan Jintian slightly lowered his head and asked respectfully. "Hee, you don't know this old man, but this old man knows you. Your Zhan family sure has guts. You actually dared to hire assassins to kill a student of Vast Heaven University?" Chiu Xiong's voice was low and his eyes revealed a trace of ruthlessness. Chapter 113. Zhan Jintian felt that the whole world was spinning. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. Facing a real cultivator, even the awe-inspiring Zhan Jintian felt pressured. "Senior, what do you mean?" Zhan Jintian forced himself to play dumb. "Humph. Zhan Jintian, you don't have to play dumb in front of this old man. Who are the killers you hired? Who are the people you contacted? This old man knows all of them. This old man just needs to send a 1,000-mile sound transmission to the Security Bureau to report, and your Zhan family will be finished." Chiu Xiong's voice was low, and his tone was full of threat. "Senior, this Zhan doesn't seem to know you. There should be no enmity between us." Zhan Jintian carefully asked. The turbulence in his heart had calmed down a lot. If he wanted to report, why did he have to talk so much nonsense with him? This old man must have some other purpose. "Zhan Jintian, you and I have no enmity between us, but now I have something on you. If you want to protect your family, you have to do something for me. After it is done, this old man will forget everything I know and will never mention it again." Chiu Xiong returned to the topic. "Senior, please speak." Zhan Jintian's heart was relieved. "Well, I have a spirit-bursting pill here. Give it to your son, and it can raise his cultivation level to the Qi gathering stage in a short time. Then he can kill Li Daochong in the finals." Chiu Xiong said as he handed an orange pill to Zhan Jintian. Taking the pill, Zhan Jintian's heart thumped. The spirit-bursting pill could indeed raise the cultivation level of the person who took it by a large margin in a short time. But after taking it, there would be sequelae. It would cause the person's spirit root to be completely fixed. From then on, the person could only reach the limit of the spirit-bursting pill. There would be no hope for a breakthrough in this life. "Why are you not willing?" Chiu Xiong frowned. Zhan Jintian's lungs were about to explode, but he didn't dare to say anything. "Zhan Jintian, if you don't want your Zhan family to disappear from Blue Bay Star, You'd better be sensible. Now call your son over and take it in front of me. Qiu Xiong said in a commanding tone. Zhang Jintian did not dare to take the risk and had no choice but to call Zhang Honglai over. Qiu Xiong's hand moved, and Zhang Honglai was controlled by an invisible force. He opened his mouth, and Qiu Xiong grabbed the pill from Zhang Honglai's hand and flicked it into Zhang Honglai's mouth. Zhang Honglai coughed and swallowed the pill. Dad, what's that? Zhang Honglai wanted to vomit, but couldn't. The pill melted in his mouth and flowed down his throat into his stomach. Qiu Xiong looked around. After confirming that no one was paying attention to them, he grabbed with both hands and his figure flashed. In the next second, the three of them appeared in a school building. At this time, there was a sea of people outside, but there was no one in the school building. Zhang Honglai suddenly felt the spiritual energy in his body explode and spread out. It was extremely painful. In less than a minute or two, Zhang Honglai's pain subsided a lot. Zhang Honglai was surprised to find that his cultivation had reached the early stage of the qi gathering and was approaching the middle stage of the qi gathering. What's going on? How did I enter the qi gathering stage? Zhang Honglai was confused. Zhang Jintian sighed. As the saying goes, the evils brought on by oneself are the hardest to bear. With his son's talent, it shouldn't be a problem for him to reach the foundation establishment stage. After taking the spirit explosion pill, there was no hope for him to reach the foundation establishment stage. If he was lucky, he would only reach the peak of the qi gathering stage. Kid, this is a big gift from this old man. I guarantee that you'll enter the top 15 in this competition and successfully qualify for the joint examination of 100 schools. Why don't you thank me properly? Qiu Xiong boasted shamelessly. It's true. Zhang Honglai's eyes lit up. Ask your father if you don't believe me. Qiu Xiong smiled. Dad. Zhang Honglai looked at Zhang Jintian. Yes. Zhang Jintian's heart was bleeding, but he had no choice but to agree in the face of Qiu Xiong's pressure. Ha, that's great. Zhang Honglai couldn't help laughing, then saluted Qiu Xiong. Thank you, senior. Hee, if you want to thank this old man, then get rid of that kid Li Daochong, Qiu Xiong replied with a fake smile. Does senior have a grudge against Li Daochong? Zhang Honglai was slightly surprised. This old man and Li Tianyang have an irreconcilable enmity. Qiu Xiong's eyes flashed coldly. Senior, don't worry. Even if you don't say it, Junior will beat him to death in the arena, Zhang Honglai said fiercely. That's good. The third round of the preliminaries will begin soon. This old man has something to do, so I'll take my leave first. After saying that, Qiu Xiong's figure disappeared. Zhang Jintian couldn't see Qiu Xiong's movements at all. It was as if he disappeared into thin air. He was shocked. Just now, he wanted to fight back, but now it seemed like it was just wishful thinking. This old man was probably a master in the middle or even the late stage of the foundation establishment stage. Zhang Honglai's wristwatch rang, informing him that the next round was about to begin. Zhang Honglai's face revealed a smug smile. He entered the spiritual nexus's great illusionary land. Now, even if he faced Gu Chao, he wouldn't even blink. The third round of the preliminaries began. Li Daochong stood on the arena. This time, his opponent was a little girl. She looked very childish with 2 pigtails and was holding a lollipop in her hand. Li Daochong's eyes were tightly closed. He didn't have any intention of opening them, but everything around him was under his control. Big brother, I heard that you're very powerful. Can you go easy on me? I'm not asking for much. Let's fight to a draw, okay? The little girl licked her lollipop and replied in a childish voice. Li Daochong's eyebrows twitched, but he didn't reply. When the little girl spoke, there was a strange change in her aura. This made Li Daochong a little vigilant. Many of the spectators in the spectator stands revealed shocked expressions. Isn't that girl Hellion Xiaoi, the second daughter of the Hellion family on the Red Sun Star? The reputation of the Red Sun Star's Hellion family was much stronger than the 4 major families on the Blue Bay Star. It was said that the family's ancestor, Yuan Ying, was still alive. Yes, it is said that the girl entered the new star competition through the Department of Education. She participated in the first round. In fact, Helian Xiaoi's cultivation has already surpassed the 10th level of the Qi refinement realm. Li Daochong has met his match. Let's see what he can do. I don't believe that this guy can still use telekinesis to attack. No matter how powerful Li Daochong is, there is a limit. Helian Xiaoi is considered one of the best among the younger generation on the Red Sun Star. Don't be fooled by her cute appearance. In fact, she is cunning and ruthless. The spectators were discussing animatedly. Because the battle platform was supported by a protective net, the sound from the outside was also blocked and couldn't be heard. Helian Xiaoi looked at Li Daochong with a curious face. "Big brother, I have a lollipop. Do you want it?" Li Daochong still didn't reply. "Big brother, you're so arrogant. I'm talking to you, and you don't even respond. I'm so sad. Look at how handsome you are. Do you have a girlfriend?" Helian Xiaoi tilted her head and asked. Naturally, there was no response. As Helian Xiaoi spoke, she finished her lollipop. She casually threw the stick of the lollipop away. Bang! Chapter 114. There was an uproar in the stands. Who would have thought that the lollipop that Helian Xiaoi was eating was actually a hidden weapon? The battle platform was quickly surrounded by a thick fog, making it impossible to see what was happening inside. Only some light tapping sounds could be heard. The spectators in the auditorium started to grumble, especially those arena enthusiasts. They were complaining incessantly. Their purpose in coming here was to analyze Li Daochong's attack methods. For some paranoid enthusiasts, it would be very uncomfortable if they didn't solve the mystery. Now that he was blocked by the fog, he couldn't see anything. It was as if he was looking at a sexy photo of a mysterious girl who was getting more and more revealing. Just as he was about to see the last part of the clouds and the sun, and about to peek at the last few naked photos of the mysterious girl, suddenly, someone covered their eyes and didn't let them see. For a screen-licking nerd, they were very anxious. Pudong. After a few seconds of silence, a sound was heard again. After a while, a notification sounded. Li Daochong wins. Soon, Li Daochong walked out of the gradually dissipating fog. In the center of the battle platform, Helian Xiaoi was lying on her back. Her big eyes looked up in disbelief. She didn't lose consciousness, but her whole body was paralyzed and couldn't move. At the same time, the other battle platforms had different battle situations. Some battles were very intense. Both sides fought until the sky was dark and the earth was dark. Some battles were stable. Both sides faced each other and observed each other. They didn't make a move easily. There were also some that were like Li Daochong's situation. The battle ended in an instant. One side was extremely powerful, while the other side didn't have any power to resist. The most outstanding ones were naturally the 5 great experts recognized by Blue Bay Star. In the first round, they didn't win. In the second round, whoever met them was unlucky. Almost all of them won in one move. Gu Chao's Gu family's secret technique could blow his opponent away in one breath. No one was worthy of him moving a step. Okikin was even better. He had a giant stick on his shoulder and an apple in his mouth. But why did he eat in the great illusionary land? Just to taste the taste. This proud son of heaven had a very special hobby. At the start of the battle, Ao Kachuan only used his aura to frighten his opponents. No one dared to accept the challenge. Just by looking at that huge rod that weighed at least 1,000 kilograms, they completely lost the desire to fight. They directly admitted defeat without even fighting. Orson's 2 rounds of duels were a bit more comical. This kid always let others make the first move. Moreover, it was a close-range fight, and he definitely didn't dodge the first 3 punches. Whoever could knock him down in 3 punches would be considered the winner. No one dared to make a move against Orson. Seeing that his opponent didn't dare to make a move, Orson threatened that if they didn't agree, he would beat them into a pile of shit. It was useless even if they admitted defeat. In the end, after 2 rounds, Orson's opponents were all brute force type burly men. After bombarding Orson with 3 punches, then there was no then. After the 3 punches, all the bones in their hands were shattered. Then, they were suppressed by Orson's aura and fell to the ground, unconscious. Compared to the 3 people above, Duan Yaoyao's method was obviously gentler. No matter what, he would take out his fists and use them. However, there was no one else who could knock his opponent unconscious with just the wind from his fists. Duan Yaojuan's voice sounded. Once the match started, he raised his hand and punched. No matter how far the distance was, he didn't move from his original position and punched in the opponent's direction. A buzzing sound echoed. Then, the opponent was sent flying and fell to the ground, motionless. Yifeiyue's 2 rounds were a bit strange. She didn't seem to make any special moves, but her opponent fell. In this aspect, she had the same effect as Li Daochong. However, Yifeiyue didn't use telekinesis attack. Yifeiyue wasn't good at telekinesis. She used sword intent. The sword was in her hand, and the intent was in her heart. Before the sword came out, the intent came out first. The intent came out first, and the intent came out first. In the 2 rounds of opponents, Yifeiyue only needed to use her intent to make her opponent lose the ability to fight. Except for the 5 great experts, the students from his super classes were also very powerful. Lu Ming, Wang Yu, and Luo Dehai were the 3 representatives. Coincidentally, there was one each from Profound Heaven University, Tianhong University, and Yunnan University. Lu Ming's sun-piercing flying dagger was unpredictable and impossible to guard against. His opponent didn't even know what was going on before he was burnt by the thunderfire on the flying dagger and was defeated. Wang Yu's method was relatively more conventional. With a long sword in hand, she sent out a beam of sword chi that couldn't be avoided and directly sent her opponent flying. Luo Dehai was the top representative of the brute force school. His brute force was like a giant god. His huge body made people despair. With a height of 2.5 meters and a descendant of a giant race, he was born with godly strength. One punch from him could even turn a stone horn bull into a pool of blood. When the opponent saw that his opponent was Luo Dehai, he immediately gave up and surrendered for the sake of the next round. As long as the green hills are there, there's hope. There was no need to bicker with a barbarian like Luo Dehai. Zhang Honglia's 2 matches were also clean and tidy. The art of collapsing C relied on one's aura. He didn't even need to make a move to defeat his opponent. Zhang Honglia's strength could be said to have increased the most among all the people present. Although the video of him being brutally beaten by Li Daochong during the big exam was leaked, no one doubted his talent. Especially Zhang Honglia's 2 opponents were quite strong. The first one was a top 3 student from Tianhong University who was defeated in 1 move. The second one was even more impressive. He was a second-year senior from Yunnan University who didn't have to make a move in the first round. He was at the peak of the 10th layer of Qi refining. Zhang Honglai didn't even need to make a move and only used his aura to cripple the senior. For a moment, everyone was shocked. That senior's strength was so strong that he could challenge someone above his level. A student at the 11th layer of Qi refining might not be his match. However, he couldn't even make a move against Zhang Honglai. Just the pressure of his aura was enough to make that senior kneel on the ground and unable to move. From this, it could be seen that Zhang Honglia's strength had already made a qualitative leap compared to the end-of-term exam. Some people felt that Zhang Honglia's aura was the strongest among all the people present. Even Gu Chao was inferior to him. Speculations that Zhang Honglai had already broken through to the Qi gathering stage quietly arose. After 3 rounds, it was gradually clear who was the strongest and who was the weakest among the 1,800-plus students. The strong were ridiculously strong, while the weak were so weak that they couldn't even withstand a single blow. The path of cultivation was just like this. Once you couldn't keep up with the pace, you would be left far behind. If you wanted to catch up in the future, unless you had some amazing fortuitous encounter or a sudden change in your spirit veins, the gap between you would only grow bigger and bigger until it was impossible to surpass. Soon, the 5 rounds of preliminaries were over. The students who won 5 rounds advanced to the next level. The students who lost 3 rounds in a row were directly eliminated. The students who didn't win 5 rounds or lost 3 rounds in a row didn't have to go through a rematch. There were only about 300 students in this group. There were 2 rematches. If you won all of them, you would advance. If you lost one round, you would be eliminated. The rules were just that cruel. If you didn't have absolute strength, then don't hold on to luck. Only those who had enough strength could enter the semifinals. The rematches also quickly ended. In the end, the number of students who entered the semifinals was greatly reduced. Out of the 1,800-plus students, only 400-plus students remained. The preliminaries were finished in the morning. There was a 2-hour break at noon, and the semifinals began in the afternoon. The rules of the semifinals were more or less the same as the preliminaries. The opponents were still decided by drawing lots. The only difference was that each person would only have 5 matches. The duration of each match was extended to 9 minutes, which was 3 times longer than the preliminaries. If you defeated your opponent within 3 minutes, you would be awarded 9 points. If you defeated your opponent within 3 minutes, you would be awarded 6 points. If you defeated your opponent within 6 minutes, you would be awarded 3 points. If you tied, you would be awarded 0 points. If you lost, you would be awarded -3 points, -6 points, and -9 points. Chapter 115. More than 400 students were competing for 30 spots, with only 1 out of 15 remaining. How fierce was the competition? However, after the preliminaries, there was a general conclusion about who could enter and who couldn't. Perhaps it couldn't be said to be 100% accurate, but the stronger ones had already locked in the top 10. At noon, the students who entered the semifinals seized the time to rest. They took all kinds of spirit pills and soaked in spirit liquids, allowing themselves to recover to their peak state as quickly as possible. The 5 experts were surrounded by the higher-ups of their respective clans, cheering them on and providing them with high-end spirit meat for lunch. All the contestants who were favored by their clans received the best service and were treated like treasures. Their lunch break couldn't be too extravagant. Heavens, is Gu Chao eating Sea King beast meat? Some students exclaimed as they looked enviously at the blue spirit meat delivered to Gu Chao's mouth by a beautiful maid. Don't make a fuss. Gu Chao eats this kind of high-grade spirit meat every day. It's Blue Bay Star's top-grade spirit meat, Kuan whale meat. It has the effect of evolving the body. Eating it every day without cultivating will allow one's body to reach the 4th layer of qi refining after a year, another student explained. On the other side, Zhan Honglai was sitting on an ice soul recliner. Behind him, a maid was massaging his temples. Beside him, another maid was constantly feeding him purple forest grapes. Each grape was worth 10,000 Federation coins. It was a top-grade spirit fruit that could nourish one's spirit veins and replenish one's qi. Eating it every day without cultivating would increase one's qi. After 3 years, one could reach the 5th layer of qi refining. The reason why the disciples of wealthy clans could cultivate faster than ordinary people wasn't just because of their innate talent, but also because of the unlimited supply of resources. For the majority of cultivators, it was far beyond their reach. Yi Feiyue was even better. She was directly served by 2 elders of her clan. One was performing acupuncture on her, while the other was concocting a kind of spirit flower juice, which was then handed to Yi Feiyue to drink. Orson was more barbaric. He was holding an ice-fire unicorn's leg in his hand and was chewing on it with big bites, not caring about his table manners at all. From time to time, he would even spit out broken bones, and the sound of chewing was extremely loud. In short, the treatment of these fellows was beyond the reach of ordinary people. Many students could only watch enviously. Poverty had limited their imaginations. Today was an eye-opener. Among the many strong contestants, Li Daochong was the only exception. During the break, other than Lu Feng, Li Qingyao, and Ouyang Qian, the others all kept their distance. They did not receive any luxurious treatment and were as light as a clear spring. Only a delicate, petite, and cute little maid handed an oversized lunchbox to Li Daochong. Li Daochong's current strength was estimated to be around the top 50. Even if he entered the top 30, it would not be enough to shock everyone. Although the identity of psychic cultivator was very powerful, it would be hard to say if they were to face a truly powerful opponent. Telekinesis attacks could only be used to crush opponents weaker than oneself. Once one encountered an opponent of equal or stronger than oneself, telekinesis attacks were almost useless. Li Daocheng's opponents in the preliminaries weren't very strong. They didn't have any magic weapons that could defend against psychic attacks. If he met an opponent with a magic weapon that could defend against psychic attacks, Li Daocheng would probably be killed in seconds. This was also the reason why Li Daocheng wasn't favored. Many people also studied Li Daocheng's performance on the ghost hunting planet. They mainly analyzed the two matches with Orson and Zhang Honglai. They found traces of Li Daocheng's psychic attacks. It could be seen that Li Daocheng relied on psychic attacks and knew a little martial arts. There was nothing special about him. They all thought that Li Daocheng's upper limit should be around the top 50 of the semifinals. After the meal, there was still half an hour of rest. Many female students were infatuated. They sat around the arena and whispered to each other, looking for powerful and noble young masters. This group of young girls fantasized that they would be fancied by someone and that they would be able to follow their husbands in the future. The Rising Star competition was organized by the Blue Bay Star Education Department. It was very important and was the top competition in Blue Bay Star. Whoever could stand out would definitely have a meteoric rise in the future. Moreover, most of the strong guys also had extraordinary families behind them. Sidulan and Huang Yanhui were surrounded by a group of girls. In Dark Firmament University, these two girls were the most popular after Yifei Yue. They were strong and had big families behind them. The Situ and Huang families were second only to the four big families in Tianyuan City. The two girls were students of a superclass. Sidulan ranked 6th and Huang Yanhui ranked 7th. In Tianyuan City, countless families wanted to marry the two girls. If the two families joined forces, the benefits in the future would go without saying. The most important thing was their genes. The two girls were strong. In the future, the probability of their descendants having 5-element spirit meridians and mysterious heaven spirit meridians would greatly increase. Just now, Gu Chao looked at me. A girl sitting next to Sidulan covered her face and was flattered. Come on, how is he looking at you? He's clearly looking at Yanhui, okay? Another girl rolled her eyes at that girl. Lan, who are you looking at? Why are you so engrossed? Huang Yanhui turned her head and saw Sidulan looking in a certain direction and asked curiously. Sidulan immediately retracted her gaze. Oh no. Huang Yanhui immediately looked and saw a young man wearing an old blue sweater under a tree outside the ring. He was holding a big lunchbox in his hand and wolfing it down as if there was no one around. From time to time, he would give a thumbs up to the little girl next to him and praise her. Lan, are you looking at Li Daocheng? Huang Yanhui recognized the young man at a glance. After the preliminaries, this guy could be considered a popular person. In addition to a few experts and a few students whose strength had increased by leaps and bounds, the most attention was probably Li Daocheng. Although this guy's final evaluation wasn't very high, his future achievements wouldn't be too low. However, this guy's background was a bit complicated and he seemed to have many enemies. There were many people who wanted to see him make a fool of himself, including his original family. The Li family didn't like Li Tianyang and his son. It wasn't anything new. Don't you think that Li Daocheng is a person worthy of respect? He was abandoned by his family, and his father met with misfortune. He didn't have much talent, and was never looked favorably upon by others. He grew up in ridicule and teasing, but he didn't become depressed because of this. He still maintained a passionate heart and silently cultivated, taking first place in the big test. I used to look down on him, but I don't know why, but I feel that I was very ignorant back then. Isn't this kind of young person worthy of respect? Sidulan suddenly said with emotion. Huang Yanhui looked at Sidulan in shock, as if she didn't know her. Lan, don't tell me you've taken a fancy to Li Daocheng. Sidulan shook her head slightly and said with a desolate expression, It's not up to me to decide whether I like him or not. Huang Yanhui was stunned for a moment before she thought of something and said, Lan, is your marriage set? Sidulan sighed and didn't answer, which could be considered as a tacit agreement. Huang Yinhui said in shock, Lan Lan, what is your father thinking? He wants you to marry that guy who's worse than a beast? The lunch break quickly passed, and a notification sounded from the podium. The students participating in the semi-finals immediately entered the great illusionary land. The spiritual brain had already arranged the random matchups. Over 400 students were immediately sent to their respective battle platforms once they entered the great illusionary land. The audience chose to watch the matches according to their preferences. Li Daocheng's battle platform was filled to the brim with spectators. Everyone was very curious about cultivators. Most importantly, Li Daocheng's opponent this time was Yi Feiyue. Chapter 116. Although Li Daocheng is very strong, I'm afraid he will lose miserably against one of the 5 great experts. Yi Feiyue? Yeah, once a psychic cultivator loses their psychic attacks, they won't be far from death. Li Daocheng was lucky in the preliminaries and didn't meet any strong opponents. But in the semifinals, all his luck was used up. His first match is against Yi Feiyue. What a tragedy. Many students in the audience looked at Li Daocheng with sympathetic eyes. In their eyes, this match was destined to end with Li Daocheng's defeat. There were also some arena enthusiasts who were more excited. They could finally see how Li Daocheng launched his telekinesis attack. This group of people had no interest in winning or losing. They only wanted to study battle techniques. On the battle platform, when Li Daocheng saw that his opponent was Yi Feiyue, he was more or less surprised. He hadn't seen her since they parted on the ghost hunting planet. Li Daocheng had a good impression of Yi Feiyue and already considered her a friend. In contrast to Li Daocheng's calmness, Yi Feiyue's beautiful brows were flickering with fear. Ever since she came into contact with Li Daocheng on the ghost hunting planet, the most terrifying opponent in Yi Feiyue's heart was Li Daocheng. Even if she had to face Gu Chao, Yi Feiyue didn't want to face Li Daocheng because she couldn't see through him. Who was Li Daocheng's master? What was the limit of his talismans? What kind of cultivation technique did he know? What kind of ultimate move did he have? Yi Feiyue was clueless. Like everyone else, she only knew that Li Daocheng could use psychic attacks. She also knew that Li Daocheng could make talismans and that his level was definitely above that of ordinary spirit sequencers. Yi Feiyue estimated that Li Daocheng was at least a high-level spirit sequencer, which was already quite good on the Blue Bay Star. If Li Daocheng had a strengthened level 4 talisman, Yi Feiyue would be very injured. How could she defend against a dozen of them at the same time? In case Li Daocheng's master made a higher level talisman for him to defend himself, the power of a level 5 talisman would increase exponentially. Even a cultivator in the middle stage of the Qi condensation realm wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow from a level 5 talisman. Talismans were that powerful. The only flaw was that they were expensive and could only be used once. Level 5 talismans were already an astronomical figure. Level 6 talismans were the patent's patent. No matter how awesome a talisman was, it would be gone once it was used up. Using a talisman was not burning money, but using a missile to blow up a vault. Match. Yi Feiyue's heart skipped a beat and the corner of her eyes twitched. She looked at Li Daocheng's clean face and saw a faint smile appear on it. Yi Feiyue felt a chill run down her spine. She vigilantly looked at Li Daocheng to see if he had a talisman in his hand. She poured all of her spirit energy into her magic robe and activated the protective shield. She was afraid that Li Daocheng would attack her with telekinesis and she would fall down without knowing what happened. Come on, Yi Feiyue, Li Daocheng said as he cracked his neck. I admit defeat, Yi Feiyue suddenly said without warning. What? Everyone in the audience stared at Yi Feiyue, wondering if they were hallucinating. Li Daocheng smiled indifferently. Are you sure? Yi Feiyue shrugged. I'm sure. I can't beat you anyway. Wasting my energy will only affect the rest of the match. I might as well save my energy to deal with the others. Li Daocheng raised his eyebrows and asked, How do you know you can't beat me if you don't try? Yi Feiyue's eyes flashed with a trace of craftiness. A woman's intuition. Ha ha. Li Daocheng laughed heartily when he heard the answer. He turned around and walked down the platform. Li Daocheng wins and gets 9 points. The more than 10,000 spectators in the audience were baffled. No one could understand why Yi Feiyue would admit defeat. What the hell? The process and the result were all wrong. In the first round of the semifinals, no one expected that the first match to end would be between Li Daocheng and Yi Feiyue. Li Tianqing sat in the audience with a gloomy face. He never dreamed that Yi Feiyue, who was specially arranged to fight Li Daocheng, would actually admit defeat in front of everyone without any self-respect. Yi Feiyue was recognized as one of the top 5 young experts of Blue Bay Star and the only woman. What the hell was she thinking? Li Tianqing gnashed his teeth in hatred. The haze in Zhang Jintian's heart became even thicker. Yi Feiyue actually admitted defeat in front of Li Daocheng. What kind of situation was this? Deacon Li, who do you want to arrange as Li Daocheng's next opponent? Zhang Jintian sent a message to Li Tianqing. Not for the time being. Let's see if this kid can enter the finals. We'll talk about it when the real battle starts. It's not that easy to seriously injure someone in the great illusionary land. Li Tianqing quickly replied. Zhang Jintian put away his wristwatch. His face was gloomy and uncertain. He then sent a long message to several elders in his family. After sending this message, Zhang Jintian logged out of the spiritual network and was about to go back. However, a wave of pressure hit him in the face. Not far away, Qiu Xiong's turbid eyes were faintly looking at him. Zhang Jintian was about to get up, but immediately stopped and sat back in the VIP seat. The second round of the semifinals. Li Daocheng's opponent was a student of the Cloud Mist University's superclass called Luo Feng. He was at the peak of the 10th layer of the Qi refining stage and had the fire spirit pulse of the 5 elements. As soon as the match started, Luo Feng put up a protective net. Li Daocheng tried to use his telekinesis to attack, but the result was that his telekinesis hit an invisible barrier and could not penetrate it. Even if Li Daocheng used all his strength to break through the barrier, the effect of his telekinesis attack would be greatly reduced. Luo Feng felt that the barrier blocked some kind of invisible attack. He smiled sinisterly and said, "Hee hee, Li Daocheng, your good days are over. Do you really think that you can rely on your telekinesis attack to be unparalleled in the world? Then you're gravely mistaken. This robe I'm wearing is called Bright Shield. It's a middle-grade robe of the human rank. Whether it's physical or magical attacks, it can resist telekinesis attacks. Li Daocheng, if you meet me, you'd better admit defeat. Otherwise, you'll die a horrible death. I'll make sure that you can't fight in the next match. How about it? I'll give you 3 seconds to consider whether you want to admit defeat or not." Li Daocheng curled his lips and said, "You talk too much nonsense." Luo Feng's face turned cold. "Since you refuse a toast and insist on drinking a forfeit, then don't blame me." Swish! The sound of something breaking through the air. Li Daocheng gently tossed his hand, and a red light was emitted from his hand. Hidden weapon? Many people in the audience stared at the light beam without blinking. They wanted to see through it, but unfortunately it was too fast and they couldn't see it clearly. The light beam passed through the air and instantly turned into a fireball. It was a talisman. Luo Feng raised the wind and fire-long blade in his hand and aimed at the fireball. His face was full of contempt. How could a mere fire talisman hurt him? I'm a fire spirit vein of the 5 elements, so I'm immune to fire attacks. Li Daocheng, you're really an idiot. Didn't you read the information before the match? Luo Feng cursed in his heart. Bang! The moment the long blade hit the fireball, there was a dull sound. Whoosh! Flames rose and rushed towards Luo Feng. What? Luo Feng was shocked. The fireball formed by the fire talisman was far more powerful than he imagined. The flames were close to the true fire realm. Luo Feng instantly felt the threat of death. The fire spirit vein in his body released fire spirit qi to resist the flames. But he couldn't resist at all. Luo Feng flew backwards in the next second. With a bang, He hit the protective net and bounced back onto the platform. His body was char-black. His body trembled and emitted green smoke. Chapter 117. What? Someone in the audience immediately stood up with a confused look on his face. Luo Feng had won 5 consecutive matches in the preliminaries. None of his opponents could take more than 3 of his moves. Luo Feng's 5 elements, Spiritual Pulse and Fire Spiritual Pulse, were also extremely aggressive attributes. Needless to say, his strength was ranked in the top 10 of Yunnan University. Such a powerful person was actually killed by a talisman. What the hell? Shameless. Despicable, too despicable. Shameless. Li Daochong, this kid, really has a lot of tricks. Telekinesis attack is already very wretched, but he still used a talisman. How can Li Daochong's talisman be so powerful? Do you still need to ask? This kid must have used telekinesis attack. He doesn't know anything. He must have a life-saving trump card on him. That fire talisman's power is not small. It's most likely a level 4 fire talisman. There is a lot of discussion in the audience, but most people looked at Li Daochong with a little more disdain in their eyes. Li Daochong won, but there was a suspicion that he used tricks. He never confronted his opponent head-on and used all his secret moves. It gave people a feeling that he had an unfair advantage. Although the cultivators had a lot of tricks up their sleeves, in a competition where competition was the main focus, the spectators preferred the courageous and fearless duels. Li Daochong's way of winning was really not very glorious. At least in the eyes of most people, such a way was meaningless. Talismans could always be obtained as long as one had money. What kind of ability was that? Luo Feng is immune to fire attacks. Why couldn't he even resist Li Daochong's fire talisman? Someone asked curiously. Nonsense. From the power of the fire talisman, it must be a level 4 fire talisman. No matter how powerful Luo Feng is, he is only a Qi refinement cultivator. How can he resist a level 4 fire talisman? If it is a well-made level 4 fire talisman, it can reach the level of pseudo-true fire, which is close to a level 5 fire talisman. Of course, Luo Feng can't resist it. A competition enthusiast next to him explained. In a short time, the news that Li Daochong carried a level 4 fire talisman spread. Li Daochong, who wasn't thought highly of in the first place, had his evaluation lowered by another level. Powerful talismans weren't easy to obtain. 1 or 2 was the limit. Relying on talismans wouldn't be enough to last until the end. Even against an opponent like Luo Feng, he had started to use talismans. It was clear that Li Daochong no longer had any trump cards. At this moment, many people finally understood why Yi Feiyue had admitted defeat in the first match against Li Daochong. She had probably found out through some channels that Li Daochong had a powerful talisman on him and was unwilling to consume it. In the great illusionary land, everyone had the same skills and equipment as they did in real life. Similarly, all the skills and equipment had the same attributes as they did in real life. For example, if you had 1 talisman on you, you wouldn't have another after using it. If you had 2 talismans, you could use 2 talismans. A talisman as powerful as the one Li Daochong had used was shockingly valuable, so he wouldn't have too many on him. He estimated that 2 would be the limit. Li Daochong didn't care about what other people thought or analyzed. The reason he had used talismans against Luo Feng was just to experiment. Li Daochong hadn't used the level 4 strengthened fire talisman since he had created it, so he didn't know how powerful it was. The cost of experimenting in real life was too great. Li Daochong had spent 200,000 Federation coins to create such a level 4 strengthened fire talisman. He also had to spend time and effort to construct a precise spirit sequence. All of this could be converted into money. The cost would be at least 100,000 coins. In other words, the cost of creating such a talisman was 300,000 coins. Although Li Daochong had some money now, he hadn't reached the point where he could casually burn 300,000 Federation coins. With the help of the Great Illusionary Land, he could test the talisman for free and see how powerful it was. Li Daochong was very satisfied with the results. To be able to kill a cultivator like Luo Feng in an instant, the talisman's power had exceeded his expectations. Li Daochong had created a total of 8 level 4 strengthened talismans, 2 fire talismans, 2 ice talismans, 2 golden bell talismans, and 2 thunder talismans. Li Daochong had spent half of the money he had earned during this period on talismans, so he didn't have much left. However, self-made talismans were much cheaper than buying them. Thus, the outside world's prediction that Li Daochong only had 2 powerful talismans was completely wrong. After 2 rounds of the semifinals, the students who had obtained 18 points didn't count. There were only about 20 people. 18 points in 2 rounds was a perfect score. Among the 5 great experts, Yi Feiyue had the least points. She had 0 points, so 1 win and 1 loss canceled each other out. The other 4 great experts had defeated their opponents with overwhelming superiority. The next 3 rounds were completed in the blink of an eye. Li Daochong's next 3 opponents weren't very strong and didn't receive much resistance. 2 of them were defeated with telekinesis attacks, while the last one was defeated with a talisman. Li Daochong had defeated all his opponents in a flash. After 5 rounds, he had obtained 45 points. However, due to Li Daochong's use of talismans as an auxiliary means, the number of matches he had participated in had greatly decreased. Who didn't know how to use talismans? There was nothing to study. In addition, Li Daochong's luck in drawing lots was very good. His opponents weren't very strong. The number of people watching the last 2 rounds of the competition was actually less than 100. Some people on the spiritual net predicted that Li Daochong would definitely enter the finals. However, none of his opponents in the finals were easy to deal with. All of them were the top geniuses of Blue Bay Star. Whether it was cultivation-based, strength, or equipment, they would all be on another level. Li Daochong would be beaten back to his original state after entering the finals. He would probably be easily defeated by anyone. Li Daochong, on the other hand, was happy and relaxed to be looked down upon and ignored. On the contrary, being stared at by countless pairs of eyes made him feel uncomfortable. In the end, the top 10 were easily determined. All 10 of them had obtained 45 points. Apart from Li Daochong, the other 9 were Gu Chao, Ao, Kachuan, Orson, Zhan Honglai, Duan Yao, Lu Ming, Wei Luo Dehai, and Li Tianyao. Out of the remaining 20 spots, 7 of them had been determined. Their points weren't too controversial, but there was no way to determine the remaining 13 spots. This was because there were 37 students who had the same final points. Yi Feiyue was also among them. She had suffered a loss because she had admitted defeat against Li Daochong in the first round. In the following 4 matches, she had won all of them in 1 move, but she had only obtained 27 points. These 37 students could only participate in additional matches to determine the final 13 spots. In the end, Yi Feiyue was the first to obtain a spot with an overwhelming advantage. The remaining 12 spots were only decided when it was close to evening. The semifinals ended when the sun was about to set. After a night's rest, the finals would be held in the center of Xiansong University's plaza. The remaining 30 students would have a real showdown with real swords and spears. In the evening, the Department of Education would allocate funds to arrange food and lodging, while Xiansong University would provide the venue. The participating students were not allowed to leave the university before the end of the competition. In the evening, Li Daochong didn't go to the high-end dormitory arranged for him. Instead, he stayed in the despair training room to meditate and adjust his breathing. Li Daochong felt very at ease here. The night passed. Li Daochong opened his eyes and took out old Devil Zhang's upgraded Zamadeo. The blade's body was covered in a layer of faint green light. This was the radiation wave of the green fire hidden within the blade. Li Daochong smiled faintly. He had already renamed this saber. It was called Azure Rainbow. Chapter 118. The square of Xiansong University was packed with tens of thousands of people. Today was the final showdown of the New Star competition. After the preliminaries and the semifinals, The remaining 30 students were the most outstanding representatives of this generation of Blue Bay Star. Their strength had been tested, and their future achievements wouldn't be too low. The worst of them should be able to become a cultivator at the peak of the Chi gathering stage. Most of them could reach the foundation establishment stage and become cultivators in the true sense of the word. They would become the pillars of the Shenghua Federation, and in the future, when resisting the invasion of the Hades, they would shine brightly. All the major cultivation companies on Blue Bay Star sent people to observe, and so did the major families. The top 15 of the 30 students would represent Blue Bay Star in the joint examination of 100 schools. Being able to participate in the joint examination of 100 schools meant that you would be able to step out of the small Blue Bay Star into the vast world and develop your grand plans. You might not necessarily achieve anything, but your horizons would be very different. After obtaining a place, the Department of Education would provide every student who is about to participate with abundant cultivation resources before the start of the joint examination of 100 schools. They would fully support the student's breakthrough. The joint examination of 100 schools was of extraordinary significance to the entire Blue Bay Star. Take Zhao Wujin, for example. His family wasn't a major one. Before he participated in the joint examination of 100 schools, his cultivation resources were very limited and his status wasn't valued. However, after he became famous, his status changed dramatically, and his cultivation resources were endless. Not only was there a monthly allowance from the Federation, but there were also many gifts from the major families to express their goodwill. With a military position, he was already a non-commissioned officer with the rank of second lieutenant. As long as he joined the army, he would immediately be able to command a platoon of the cultivation army and guard the border. It would be a little hard, but his cultivation resources would increase exponentially. His military position might not be very high, but his status would leap to become an existence revered by tens of thousands of people. His family would also receive a lot of benefits and courtesy. If Zhao Wujin could achieve military merits, the Zhao family could even leap to become the 5th major family on Blue Bay Star. The reason why the 4 major families of Blue Bay Star had such a lofty status and were powerful was because there were people in their families who held important positions in the military. The reason why the Li family was able to become the first of the 4 great clans was because of Li Tianyang's bravery and fearlessness in the army and his outstanding military achievements. In the Shenghua Federation, the status of soldiers was the highest. Because of them, the safety of the vast star field and billions of people was guaranteed. In vast Blue University's public square, there were 3 round arenas that were surrounded by a sea of people. 30 students were waiting in a designated area, waiting for their names to be announced. Since there were 3 arenas, 3 battles could be held at the same time. The opponents of the 30 students were no longer drawn by lot. Instead, they would fight based on their ranking. The 10 students who were tied for first place in the semifinals would be chosen by the last 10 students. The 10 students who were ranked in the middle would have a cross match. Simply put, the 11th would fight against the 20th, the 12th would fight against the 19th, the 13th would fight against the 18th, and so on. In the last 10 students, the ones ranked at the top will be the first to choose their opponents. The 30th ranked student could only fight with the remaining students in the end. This rule for the first round was also a continuation of the semifinals, allowing the students who performed outstandingly in the semifinals to have a preferential opportunity. Although the top 10 students were said to have been chosen, their opponents were the weaker ones among the 30 students. After the rule was set, the happiest person was Zhao Tansheng, who was ranked 21st. He was the Zhao family's second rising star after Zhao Wujin. Although he wasn't as strong as Zhao Wujin, he was still pretty good. He was now a sophomore and had already reached the 11th level of Qi refining. He was taking advantage of the fact that he wasn't even 20 years old to participate in this hegemony tournament. Based on Zhao Tansheng's talent, he shouldn't have been like this. However, after Zhao Wujin achieved good results in last year's 100 schools joint examination, the Zhao family received a lot of benefits and an abundance of cultivation resources. There weren't many people in the Zhao family. Among the direct descendants, there were only Zhao Wujin and Zhao Tansheng in this generation. Zhao Wujin had the support of the school and the Federation, so the majority of the resources the Zhao family received were naturally used on Zhao Tansheng. This allowed his cultivation to advance by leaps and bounds in the past half year, but most of the credit was due to the cultivation resources piled up regardless of the cost. If it was just regular cultivation, it would be pretty good if Zhao Tansheng could reach the 7th level of qi refining. Of course, his own conditions weren't too bad either. He was still teachable, but there was still a gap between him and the geniuses. Zhao Tansheng hadn't lost in the preliminaries and had only tied once in the semifinals. His magic robe was a high-grade human-tier magic treasure, and his flying frost sword was a mid-grade human-tier magic treasure with the addition of ice and snow. In addition, Zhao Tansheng also had a winning treasure that he hadn't used yet. He was preparing to use it to deal with the Great Five or other powerful opponents. It was a well-made level 4 wind blade talisman. This talisman was made by a master and was half a level higher than ordinary level 4 talismans. This wind blade talisman was sold for at least 500,000 Federation credits. It was a gift from a cultivation company that wanted a rope in Zhao Wujin. A level 4 talisman naturally had no use for a qi gathering expert like Zhao Wujin, so Zhao Wujin gave it to Zhao Tansheng to protect himself. After all, among the Zhao family's younger generation, only he and Zhao Tansheng were around 20 years old. The others were either old or young. The development of the Zhao family in the next 10 years would depend on him and Zhao Tansheng. In fact, Zhao Wujin alone could make the family skyrocket in a very short period of time. However, at that time, he wouldn't be on the Blue Bay Star very often, so the family needed someone to oversee it. As the big brother, Zhao Wujin also wanted to help this little brother Zhao Tansheng. In the future, he would let him oversee the family so that he wouldn't have to worry about the future. Zhao Tansheng didn't disappoint Zhao Wujin. He overcame all the difficulties and smoothly entered the finals. He even obtained a good ranking of 21. As the first person to pick a student in the top 10 as his opponent, Zhao Tansheng's heart was already blooming with joy. Zhao Wujin was currently the number 1 person in Xiansong University. Even the Blue Bay Star Education Department treated him like a treasure. It wasn't strange for him to know the rules of the finals in advance. Last night, Zhao Wujin had already informed Zhao Tansheng of the news and gave him a small suggestion. Among the top 10, don't even think about Gu Chao. He definitely wouldn't be able to beat him. Yi Feiyue didn't enter the top 10, so there was no need to think about the other 4 experts. Among the remaining 6, Zhao Wujin told Zhao Tansheng not to pick Lu Ming or Luo Dehai because they definitely wouldn't be able to beat him. Originally, Zhao Wujin thought that Zhan Honglai was one of the possible opponents. However, after seeing Zhan Honglia's performance in the semifinals, he was somewhat puzzled. He couldn't see through Zhan Honglai, so he was also eliminated. The remaining 3 people were Li Daochong, Li Tianyao, and Wu Yu. Zhao Wujin's suggestion to Zhao Tansheng was that Li Daochong was the weakest, but he might be more cunning. Wu Yu was the easiest to deal with, and Li Tianyao was the strongest, but Zhao Tansheng's flying frost sword had a restraining effect on him. No matter which one he chose, Zhao Tansheng had a high chance of winning. As for which one he chose, Zhao Wujin only said that Zhao Tansheng could decide for himself. In his eyes, they were all the same. Zhao Tansheng stood on the first circular stage with a light smile on his face. Zhao Tansheng, who do you choose as your first opponent? The lecturer in charge of the first stage asked. Chapter 119. When Zhao Tansheng confidently pointed at Li Daochong, the latter's face revealed a slight smile as if he had already expected this. According to the reputation of the top 10 students, Li Daochong was definitely the weakest. However, the other 9 students who had not yet made their choice revealed a regretful expression. The easiest opponent had been chosen by Zhao Tansheng, so they could only choose someone else. The student ranked 30th had an extremely ugly expression. There was no need to even think about it. There was absolutely no one who would choose Gu Chao as their opponent. His opponent was definitely Gu Chao. The tens of thousands of spectators below the stage also revealed an expected expression. Among the top 10 students, the easiest one to deal with was definitely Li Daochong, a guy who only knew telekinesis attacks and talismans. In a high-level battle, these attacks would be useless. For an expert, an opponent with only one ability was really too easy to deal with. With a good defensive robe, Li Daochong's telekinesis attacks would be completely ineffective. As for talismans, although they were powerful, the price to obtain them was too high, so there would not be too many of them. Moreover, talismans were not impossible to deal with. In front of a strong opponent, unless the talisman's level was very high, its effect would be reduced. If Li Daochong used a fire talisman to deal with Luo Feng, if it was used against Orson, the latter would be able to repel the fire talisman with a single punch. Unless Li Daochong had a level 5 talisman. A level 5 talisman's price was over 1 million Federation coins. Who could afford it? Therefore, Zhao Tansheng choosing Li Daochong as his opponent was clearly within the expectations of most people. This time Li Daochong is finished. A student below the stage gloated. Isn't that so? Telekinesis attacks and talismans are completely useless in front of this group of geniuses who have even touched the Qi gathering stage. Relying on opportunistic means to enter the finals, Li Daochong could be considered as a lucky bastard. If I had a few level 4 talismans, I could also enter the finals. The problem is that you don't, haha. Many of the students below the stage felt that it was unfair for Li Daochong to enter the finals. In their opinion, Li Daochong's strength was not necessarily stronger than theirs. Wasn't he just relying on a few talismans and some secret techniques? Li Tianyang must have used some kind of method to let Li Daochong have these things. Otherwise, how could such a guy enter the finals? In short, no one thought that Li Daochong's strength was very strong. He was just relying on himself. Yuan Longji smiled as he sat on the spectator stand. Zhao Tansheng was a rising star that he had personally taught, and his strength had improved by leaps and bounds in the past half a year. Zhao Tansheng was one of Yuan Longji's favorite students. Of course, the reason why Yuan Longji promoted Zhao Tansheng was because of Zhao Wujin. Principal Yuan, Zhao Tansheng has been cultivating under your personal supervision for the past 6 months, right? Lian Bin asked in a fawning manner. Yes, Tansheng has improved tremendously in the past half a year. I underestimated him before. Now that he's at the 11th level of Qi refining, his spiritual roots have already appeared. He's not far from the Qi condensation stage. Yuan Longji replied with satisfaction. Principal Yuan personally taught him, so he's naturally a level higher than the other lecturers. Even I feel inferior. I remember that Zhao Tansheng was only at the 8th level of Qi refining half a year ago. In such a short period of time, he has improved so much. Besides his own hard work and cultivation, the key is Principal Yuan's personal guidance. Lianbin feels inferior when it comes to educating people. In the future, I'll have to ask Principal Yuan for guidance. Yuan Longji was pleased to hear this. The reason why he had promoted Lian Bin to the top class lecturer was because of this guy's sweet mouth. Hee, Teacher Lian, you don't have to feel inferior. Your ability is also not bad. I think you have a high chance of passing the advancement test next year. Yuan Longji laughed. Teacher Lian, you don't have to feel inferior. I'll have to ask Principal Yuan to promote me. As soon as Lian Bin heard this, his eyes overflowed with joy. The advancement test that was held every 3 years was an extremely important period for all cultivators in the education industry. Lian Bin was currently a first-class lecturer. If he got promoted, he would become a special class lecturer and reach Chu Qinyue's level. If he got promoted again, he would become an associate professor. On the other side of the grandstand, a group of family higher-ups were sitting in the VIP seats, talking animatedly. Apart from the 4 great families, the Zhao family was currently in the limelight on Blue Bay Star. Because of Zhao Wujin, there were already cultivation companies on third-class cultivation planets that had reached an agreement with the Zhao family to develop mineral resources on Blue Bay Star, the surrounding star fields. As long as Zhao Wujin could enter the top 10, or even the top 5, in this year's 100 Schools Alliance, then the Zhao family would very likely become the 5th great family on Blue Bay Star in a very short period of time. Many small families were already shamelessly trying to curry favor with the Zhao family. The blatant behavior of the Lin family and the Tian family was already outrageous. A girl from the Lin family directly threw herself at a famous general of the Zhao family in public, flirting coquettishly. She couldn't wait for the general to take her home right now, even if she was just a maid. The status of the direct descendants of the Zhao family was now different. In a small family like the Lin family, even the daughter of the patriarch was out of reach. It was already a very good choice to marry a famous general. Today, the Qiao family was also invited to sit in the VIP seats. Qiao Shima's eyes had never moved from Li Daochong since he appeared yesterday, and Xinhua had uploaded a letter to Qiao Shima on the spiritual nexus, asking her to meet him on the spiritual nexus. After the meeting, and Xinhua warned Qiao Shima to be careful of Zhang Honglai. Qiao Shima didn't know why Xinhua suddenly said that, but when she learned from Xinhua that there was something wrong with the glass of red wine that Zhang Honglai had offered her at the birthday party that day, she was immediately stunned. The family tested that the spilled red wine had dissolved the doll pill in it. There was no need to be so careful at a birthday party. No one would care about spilled red wine. However, Xinua's brother, and Ding Bang, had a polar ice lion hound. This guy liked to drink. After the party was over, it somehow sneaked into the banquet hall to look for wine. When it smelled the wine on the ground, it was so excited that it licked the ground clean. Then it was a tragedy. Soon, the polar ice lion hound became motionless, as if it was possessed. Its eyes were blank. It would only respond when you asked it to do something. Otherwise, it would lie on the ground in a daze. And Ding Bang found it strange. He checked the surveillance video and then took the blood of the polar ice lion hound for testing. However, there was no result. When he returned to the Red Sun planet, and Ding Bang felt that something was wrong, he took the blood to the family laboratory and continued testing. He also specially invited a master alchemist to help. Finally, the results came out a few days ago. The wine contained the doll pill of very vicious ecstasy. After the test results came out, and Xinhua and his sister recalled Li Daochong's various actions that night, it was only then that they realized that Li Daochong was simply trying to protect Qiao Shima. But how did Li Daochong know that the glass of red wine was drugged? And Xinhua and his sister could not figure it out. However, Li Daochong's mysteriousness became even more confusing in the eyes of the brother and sister. They were afraid that the mighty person behind this man was much more powerful than they had imagined. And Xinhua saw that Qiao Shima did not seem to like Li Daochong very much that night. Although the two were engaged, there seemed to be some misunderstanding. Qiao Shima did not seem to know that Li Daochong was extraordinary. It was a waste of God's gift to ignore such a powerful person. As a good friend, and Xinhua did not want Qiao Shima to miss anything. After thinking about it, he decided to tell Qiao Shima about this matter. Looking at Li Daochong with a faint smile on his face in the ring, Qiao Shima's beautiful eyes rippled. Chapter 120. Qiao Shima stared at Li Daochong in the ring with mixed feelings. She had regretted bringing Li Daochong over after Xinua's birthday party. Recalling her attitude towards Li Daochong that day, Qiao Shima was ashamed. Li Daochong, come on. Qiao Shima murmured to herself. Sister, what did you just say? Qiao Shima, who was sitting next to Qiao Shima, asked curiously. Oh, nothing. Qiao Shima blushed and prevaricated. Really? Qiao Shima's pretty face was full of doubt. While the two women were talking, their father, Qiao Sanlang, came over with a young man in a Taoist robe. The two sisters knew this young man. He was a senior manager of the Bay Sea Refining Company, who had business dealings with the Qiao family. His name was Lin Xiaocheng. In addition to holding an important position in the largest refining company in Bay Sea, Lin Xiaocheng was also a direct descendant of the Lin family, the #1 family in Bay Sea. Both his identity and background were quite profound. Compared to the Qiao family, he was a giant. Qiao Shima and Qiao Shima frowned when they saw Qiao Sanlang. They wanted to avoid this scumbag of a father. If Qiao Sanlang's name hadn't been on the invitation list, Qiao Shima wouldn't have let him come. "Shima, why don't you get up and greet Mr. Lin?" Qiao Sanlang ordered as soon as he came over. No matter how bad Qiao Sanlang was, he was still her father. Even if Qiao Shima was gnashing her teeth in hatred, there was nothing she could do. She could only get up and greet Lin Xiaocheng before shaking hands. Lin Xiaocheng looked at Qiao Shima with a trace of yearning in his eyes. "Shima, I heard that you are divorced." "What?" Qiao Shima and Qiao Shima were stunned. Only a few people in the family knew about it, and it wasn't announced to the public. However, the two women soon found clues from Qiao Sanlang's playful expression. The two women glared at Qiao Sanlang, who said indifferently, "So be it. Why don't you let people know? Li Daocheng is not worthy of you." "You." Qiao Shima was so angry that her delicate body trembled. Qiao Shima had nothing to say to this father of hers. Her face turned cold as she sat back in her seat, ignoring Lin Xiaocheng's presence. "Daughter, I'm doing this for your own good. You won't have a future if you marry that kind of person. Compared to Mr. Lin, Li Daocheng is just a pile of **T. However, it's wise for you to leave him. Mr. Lin has always been interested in you and doesn't mind your divorce. As long as you agree to the marriage proposal from the Lin family, 1/3 of the port business in Wanhai City will be managed by the Qiao family," Qiao Sanlang boasted shamelessly. Qiao Shima ignored Qiao Sanlang and focused on Li Daocheng in the ring. Lin Xiaocheng didn't really care about Qiao Shima's attitude. It was normal for a beauty to have a little temper. It would be boring if she didn't have any personality. However, Qiao Shima was staring at Li Daocheng in the arena with a certain emotion in her eyes, which made Lin Xiaocheng very unhappy. "Young Master Lin, you're here to watch the competition too?" At this time, a few rich young masters who had business dealings with the Lin family saw Lin Xiaocheng and came over to greet him. The Lin family might not be as powerful as the four major families, but their financial resources were better. After all, they were the dominant family in Wanhai City and monopolized the entire city's business. These rich young masters naturally wanted to curry favor with Lin Xiaocheng. They also heard what Qiao Sanlang said just now. Pleasing people was also a skill. These rich young masters naturally knew that Lin Xiaocheng wanted Qiao Shima. Everyone knew about Qiao Shima's situation. Her marriage with Li Daocheng was one of the hottest gossip in Tianyuan City a few months ago. When the two really got married, many people's jaws dropped. However, recently there were rumors that Qiao Shima and Li Daocheng had divorced. There was no smoke without fire. Moreover, no matter how they looked at it, Li Daocheng was not worthy of Qiao Shima. It was normal for him to be dumped. Since Lin Xiaocheng wanted Qiao Shima, the rich young masters naturally knew how to persuade him. "Young Master Lin, if not for your age, you would have been in the top 50 if you participated in the competition. You should be in the middle stage of the Qi gathering now, right?" Another rich young master said casually. These words touched Lin Xiaocheng's heart. He laughed and said, "I was lucky to break through to the middle stage of the Qi gathering a year ago." "Amazing, young Master Lin is only 25 years old now, right?" The rich young master showed an exaggerated expression. "I'll be 25 in 3 months." Lin Xiaocheng inadvertently looked at Qiao Shima as he spoke, but the latter seemed to have not heard or seen anything. She just looked at the tall and thin figure in the arena in a daze. "Amazing, young Master Lin. If I had half of your talent, I would thank the heavens." The rich young master praised. Hee, young Master Lin's talent goes without saying. If he participated in the competition, someone like Li Daocheng, who only knows how to use talismans, would not be able to take a single blow. Young Master Lin aside, that kid Zhao Tanshen can beat Li Daocheng into a pig's head. Just wait for Li Daocheng to be humiliated. The rich young masters talked one after another, bragging that Lin Xiaocheng was better than Gu Chao. As for Li Daocheng, he was not even worth mentioning. Qiao Shima turned a deaf ear to them. She was too lazy to pay attention to this group of rich young masters. She just let them say whatever they wanted. She activated the soundproofing effect on her Taoist robe and heard nothing. Xiao Shima could not take it anymore. The more she heard, the angrier she became. Li Daochong was her brother-in-law and had saved her on the ghost-hunting planet. Regardless of whether Li Daochong was good or not, he had taken first place in the end-of-term testing. Now, he was standing in the ring of the finals. These people were shameless and boastful. They did not even have the right to participate in the competition, yet they still had the cheek to criticize. If you have the ability, go and fight Li Daochong, Xiao Shima said angrily. Yo. I didn't know that your ex-sister-in-law was so protective of her ex-brother-in-law. It doesn't matter whether we fight Li Daochong or not. That kid has to defeat Zhao Tanxing first. Oh, by the way, you better not watch. Li Daochong will be beaten like a dog. Huh? The group of rich young masters roared with laughter. Their faces were full of ridicule. Xiao Shima was so angry that she stomped her feet. She was about to walk away and scold them when a female lecturer in front of the stands held a microphone and announced, "The finals of the Rising Star competition will now begin. The first match in the first ring, Li Daochong versus Zhao Tanxing." As soon as she finished speaking, the noise in the surroundings suddenly stopped. Everyone's eyes were focused on the two people standing in the ring. Li Daochong stood with his hands behind his back, while Zhao Tanxing had a smile on his face. He did not take Li Daochong seriously at all. This kind of opponent could be killed in a matter of minutes. However, Zhao Tanxing had other plans. Previously, Li Daochong had been in the limelight. He wanted to give Li Daochong a good beating in front of everyone. Only then would he be able to display his strength. As soon as the female lecturer finished speaking, Zhao Tanxing had already dashed out. His figure disappeared almost instantly. Most of the students could not see how Zhao Tanxing moved. With a whoosh, Zhao Tanxing appeared in front of Li Daochong. Hiss! Gasps could be heard from the audience. Li Daochong stood still. He could not see Zhao Tanxing's movements at all. Zhao Tanxing's robe was always open. Li Daochong's telekinesis attack had no effect on him at all. Someone exclaimed. Behind the crowd, Orson was eating an apple in his hand. Beside him stood A.O. Kachuan and Helian Xiaoi. Chapter 121. There were only 3 arenas in the finals, and only 3 matches could be held at the same time. There were 24 students who had a bye, and they were also among the spectators. However, most of them were gathered below arena number 2. Duan Yao was in this match. Only the Orson brothers and Helian Xiaoi chose arena number 1. They were the only students who were paying attention to Li Daochong. Zhao Tanxing smiled sinisterly and flicked the flying frost sword in his hand. Zhao Tanxing's move was very tricky. He wanted to freeze Li Daochong, injure him, and then step on him. Zhao Tanxing had thoroughly studied Li Daochong's dosage last night. Although telekinesis attacks were invisible and hard to defend against, telekinesis attacks were useless as long as one wore a robe that could resist telekinesis. High-level talismans were indeed powerful, but they had to be of a high level. Li Daochong only had a level 4 talisman at most. He definitely didn't have a level 5 talisman. However, even a level 4 talisman was enough to make Zhao Tanxing suffer. So he took the initiative and instantly closed in on Li Daochong. At close range, no matter what level the talisman was, even level 10 talismans were useless. No matter how powerful they were, they had to be able to release them. At this moment, the tens of thousands of spectators saw Zhao Tanxing appear in front of Li Daochong in an instant, and many girls exclaimed, "Ah, Zhao Tanxing is so fast. Looks like he was hiding his strength in the semifinals. Li Daochong is done for." The Zhao family's flying frost sword art is powerful and has a freezing effect. It's not inferior to the death frost chi. Zhao Wujin used this sword art to shine in the 100 schools joint exam last year, making people tremble in fear. This year, the Federation's Research Institute upgraded the Zhao family's ancestral sword art by 1 level, from the original high-grade human level to low-grade earth level. Li Daochong is probably so scared that his legs have turned to jelly. He's not moving at all. Zhao Tianxing couldn't help but reveal a light smile. He was definitely going to win this battle. However, just as Zhao Tianxing was about to attack, Li Daochong's lips curled up slightly. His expression looked fearless and even had a hint of ridicule. "You're laughing at your mother." Zhao Tianxing's anger, and he cursed with more force. However, just as he opened his mouth, he stopped abruptly. Bang! Li Daochong punched Zhao Tianxing's face. Pooh! Blood spurted out. 2 front teeth spun in the air. Zhao Tianxing's body spun rapidly in the air and was thrown several meters away before crashing to the ground with a thud. The audience was deathly silent. Time seemed to have frozen. Everyone's mouths were wide open as they watched what was happening in the ring. What was going on? What just happened? Most of the students with weaker cultivations didn't see it clearly. In their eyes, Zhao Tianxing had appeared in front of Li Daochong in an instant. Then, there was a muffled sound like a fist hitting a sandbag. Then, Zhao Tianxing spun as he was sent flying, spitting out blood and teeth. Ha! The teacup in the hands of the only young man sitting in the VIP seats shattered. His handsome face revealed a cold expression as he allowed the tea to flow down his slender hands. Zhao Wujin's gentle demeanor disappeared. His eyes narrowed as he looked at Li Daochong. That punch just now was extremely precise in terms of strength, speed, and angle. If he had only relied on his fists and feet, even if he suppressed his cultivation to the 11th layer of qi refinement, he might not have been able to dodge it. Zhao Tianxing was even more so. How could Li Daochong become so powerful in such a short time? Zhao Wujin had investigated Li Daochong's background from beginning to end last night. Apart from the strange changes that had occurred in the past few months, this kid's past was not worth mentioning. If he had to find something special about this kid, it could only be his awesome father, Li Tianyang. It was also because of this that Zhao Wujin could understand Li Daochong's changes in the past few months. But he never would have thought that Li Daochong would be so powerful. Zhao Tianxing could not even withstand a single blow from Li Daochong. Zhang Jintian's hands tightly gripped the armrests of his chair. If he did not try to control his emotions, the chair would have already exploded. Li Daochong, what did Li Tianyang do to your body? Zhang Jintian's heart was filled with doubts. Qiu Xiong, who was sitting next to Zhang Jintian, had an ashen face. As a true cultivator, how could he not see the power of Li Daochong's punch? This punch was simple and unadorned, but it was precisely because of this that it showed its power. Qiu Xiong's turbid eyes flashed, and the hatred in his heart grew even stronger. But at the same time, fear emerged in his heart. Li Tianyang, I never thought that you would be able to make this silly son of yours so powerful in such a short time. What on earth did you encounter on 13 Spectre? Even with so many traps, I still couldn't kill you. It's already a miracle that you were able to come back with such serious injuries. Damn it, I still underestimated you. Qiu Xiong was filled with regret. Yuan Longji looked at the arena expressionlessly, but his heart was violently shaken. He never thought that Li Daochong would be so powerful. In just a few months, how could a silly kid with a depleted spirit vein become a heaven-sent genius? This didn't make sense. Yuan Longji had been in the cultivation education industry for decades, but he had never seen such a leap in strength. Even though he had seen it with his own eyes, he still could not believe it. The two principals, Shi Kuwei and Xie Chengjing, looked at each other in dismay. Even now, they still felt pained over the 2 items they had given out during the end-of-term testing. They felt that they had been wronged. They had given the Foundation Establishment elixir and the 9 splits saber technique to a silly kid just like that. They felt like they had been cheated. But at this moment, the same thought flashed through their minds. It wasn't wronged. Brother Shi, how do you think this punch compares to Orson's? Xie Chengjing couldn't help but ask. It's better than Orson's. This kid is really powerful. He didn't rely on luck or equipment. Brother Xie, we misjudged him, Shi Kuwei had to admit. Yeah, we misjudged him, Xie Chengjing agreed. Outside the arena, everyone was stunned by Li Daochong's punch. In the corner of the stands, Several members of the Li family's upper echelon had an indescribable expression on their faces. Should they be happy? Or should they be unhappy? Li Tianqing had almost jumped out of his seat. In his eyes, this silly nephew of his had always been trash. The strongest person in this generation of the Li family was undoubtedly Li Tianyao. Li Tianqing would never have thought that Li Daochong would be able to throw such a punch. Outside the arena, Orson was leisurely munching on an apple. He was the only one who didn't show any surprise when he saw this scene. Beside him, Ao, Kachuan, and Helian Xiaoi had expected Li Daochong to be powerful, but they didn't expect him to be this powerful. Only Orson had an expression of having expected this. He was used to it. He swallowed the apple in his hand, spat out the core, and ate the rest. He then patted the residue off his hands. I already said that Zhao Tansheng is finished. This kind of trash is trash in front of Li Daochong. Ao Kachuan. In the finals, there won't be more than 3 people who can fight with Li Daochong. Helian Xiaoi tilted her head. Which 3? Orson grinned. Take a guess. Helian Xiaoi pouted. Forget it if you don't want to say. In the arena, Zhao Tansheng struggled to get up from the ground. The blood in his body was churning, and his head was spinning. He could barely stand. Chapter 122. You don't want to admit defeat? Li Daochong's words echoed in Zhao Tansheng's ears. A piece of trash that he should have stepped on actually dared to say such words to him. Li Daochong actually just didn't want to add to the damage. Unforgivable. Zhao Tansheng's eyes revealed a sense of loss and annoyance that he had never felt before. At the same time, there was also a kind of anger, an anger that could not be any stronger. If he was defeated by Gu Chao or Ao Kachuan in one punch, then Zhao Tansheng would accept it. But Li Daochong was different. In Zhao Tansheng's eyes, Li Daochong was not even comparable to him. Hey! Zhao Tansheng spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was on the verge of collapse, but he held on. His face suddenly revealed a crazy smile. Li Daochong, I originally didn't want to use that thing on you, because you aren't worth it. But now I've changed my mind. You're worth it. Haha. Just as Zhao Tansheng laughed out loud, his hands suddenly shook, and a white light flashed past, shooting straight at Li Daochong. Don't! In the stands, Zhao Wujin directly stood up from his seat. Not only Zhao Wujin, but the other members of the Zhao family also revealed a look of fear. However, they were not worried about Zhao Tansheng, but rather Li Daochong. This was because the Wind Edge talisman that Zhao Wujin gave to Zhao Tansheng was a level 4 talisman, but it was actually a level 5 talisman. This talisman was made by a grandmaster. It was originally a level 4 talisman, but during the process of drawing the spirit sequence, he used too much force and couldn't control it properly, causing the talisman to be larger than it was originally designed. This was a level 4 talisman that was infinitely close to a level 5 talisman. Level 4 talismans were already the limit for cultivators in the Qi refining stage. Only a few geniuses could resist a level 5 talisman. Even the battle sword Augustine couldn't resist a level 5 talisman when it was still in the Qi refining stage, unless it was equipped with powerful equipment. The Wind Edge talisman was the same as the Fire Edge talisman. It was a pure offensive talisman with only one purpose, to destroy the target. The competition had a strict rule that no one was allowed to kill. Violators will be disqualified and heavily punished. Zhao Wujin prepared this talisman for Zhao Tansheng so that he could use it when facing Gu Chao or Oak Kun. Those two fellows were both wearing Earth rank magic robes. In addition to their outstanding strength, this kind of 5th rank magic talisman was not a fatal threat to them, but it was enough to make them suffer. However, it was impossible for the others to block it. Zhao Wujin would kill Li Daochong. Whether or not Li Daochong was killed, Zhao Wujin didn't care at all. At this moment, he was worried that Zhao Tansheng would be disqualified or even imprisoned. Under the watchful eyes of the public, the Security Bureau would be able to convict Zhao Tansheng without an investigation. However, as soon as Zhao Wujin's words left his mouth, boom, A deafening explosion rang out. A violent explosion erupted in the area between Li Daochong and Zhao Tanxing. Waves of air rolled, and the aftermath wreaked havoc. Some of the students who were very close to the stage were blown off their feet. The fragments of the stage from the explosion whistled through the air and shot towards the crowd. Several lecturers acted at the same time, raising a wall of air to block the fragments. Otherwise, these fragments would be enough to kill the weaker students. Piercing through their soft bodies would be a matter of seconds. Meanwhile, Zhao Tanxing's swaying body was sent flying. Like a kite with a broken string, he landed outside the stands, almost smashing into the crowd of spectating students. Fortunately, they were all very smart. Seeing Zhao Tanxing fly over, they ran faster than rabbits. With a thump, Zhao Tanxing landed on the ground, motionless like a dead pig. The Zhao family members were burning with anxiety. One of the elders leapt from the stands towards Zhao Tanxing. In the blink of an eye, he landed in front of Zhao Tanxing and grabbed Zhao Tanxing's wrist. In the next second, that Zhao family elder angrily glared at Li Daochong. "Bastard, Tanxing already has no strength to resist. Why are you still so heavy-handed?" Li Daochong frowned. "Are you blind? He was the one who released the talisman first. I was only defending myself. How could I be heavy-handed?" "Humph, can't you dodge?" The Zhao family elder coldly snorted. Li Daochong's expression turned cold. This old thing was simply shameless. He completely disregarded right and wrong to protect Zhao Tanxing. He refused to continue arguing with him. With so many people watching, there was no need to explain too much. The Zhao family elder's cultivation was only at the early stage of qi gathering. He was only thinking about Zhao Tanxing's safety. He did not see how powerful Li Daochong was. In the stands, Zhao Wujin's handsome face was filled with astonishment. In the instant that Zhao Tanxing had sent out his spirit talisman, Li Daochong had also sent out his own spirit talisman, almost at the same time. However, if one's cultivation was high enough, they would be able to see that Li Daochong released the talisman later. It was just that his reaction speed was beyond imagination. But what really shocked Zhao Wujin was the talisman that Li Daochong released. The power of the talisman was actually comparable to the one he gave Zhao Tanxing. In fact, it was even a little stronger, because after the explosion, the shock waves were all roaring in the direction of Zhao Tanxing, while Li Daochong's side did not even have the slightest fluctuation in the air. The difference between the two was obvious. "Ha!" The armrest of Zhao Wujin's chair broke in his hand. "Senior Zhao, what's wrong?" A beautiful girl standing behind Zhao Wujin asked curiously. "Haha, it's nothing." Was the chair damaged by ice ants? Zhao Wujin pretended to be calm. "No, these chairs were all bought back for the finals." The beautiful girl said curiously. "Oh, is that so? Then there must be some defective products among them." Zhao Wujin restrained his emotions and said. Li Daochong did not let down his guard just because Zhao Tanxing had lost his ability to fight. His telekinesis perception shrouded Zhao Tanxing's body. Any movement of Zhao Tanxing's would be instantly detected by Li Daochong. Li Daochong wins. The lecturer who was the referee of the first arena was stunned for a long time before he finally reacted and announced the result. Li Daochong walked down the arena in front of everyone's eyes. In the stands, Xiao Shima's delicate body trembled slightly. She did not expect Li Daochong's strength to be so strong. Zhao Tanxing's strength was considered top-notch in Xiansong University. Except for a few geniuses, he was considered outstanding. But he could not even block a single punch from Li Daochong. How is this possible? Was this person still the foolish young master who had faked a marriage with her? Thinking back to their childhood, Xiao Shima felt that it was unreal. At this time, Li Daochong's figure became somewhat strange and mysterious in her eyes. Lin Xiaocheng and the other rich young masters looked at Li Daochong walking down the arena with their mouths agape. Their mocking laughter just now turned into countless slaps to their faces. Not to mention Lin Xiaocheng. This kid Zhao Tanxing can beat Li Daochong into a pig's head. Let's wait for Li Daochong to be humiliated. A minute ago, this sentence was said by Lin Xiaocheng and the others. It seemed that the words had not completely disappeared yet, but they were slapped in the face on the spot. Xiao Shima's father, Xiao Sanlang, had a strange expression on his face. As for the words he had just belittled Li Daochong, he had long forgotten about them. For people like him, there was no shame. Xiao Sanlang was now thinking that Li Daochong was so strong that his future achievements would be above Lin Xiaoqing's. The strength of an individual could surpass the strength of a family. If a family did not have a powerful person, no matter how strong its financial strength was, it was just an empty shell. Perhaps his daughter should continue her fate with Li Daochong, Xiao Sanling thought. For him, how to make a fortune with his daughter was the most important thing. His own debt was high, and now he could only sell his 2 daughters. Li Daochong walked down the arena, and the students automatically made a path for him. In addition to the shock on their faces, there was more awe for powerful practitioners. As Li Daochong walked, no one talked loudly, and no one ridiculed him. At this time, the foolish young master who was often ridiculed by everyone no longer existed. He was replaced by a mysterious, tall, and handsome young man. Arena 1. The second round, Orson versus Hongwu. The lecturer's voice sounded, and, at this time, the students recovered from shock. As soon as they heard the names of Orson and Hongwu, they suddenly became energetic. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.